What if a single vial could make a crowd obey, and the person holding it controls the city? A hidden stockpile. A signal in the air. A child who says one word and everyone moves. Welcome to Momentum Mind. This story starts where most people would break, and ends at a mansion with no curtains. Chapter 1. The House with No Curtains. The city by the water liked to pretend it had no shadows. In the morning, lights slid over clean stone streets and bright glass towers, and people walked as if they were always being watched by someone kind. On the highest hill, behind an iron gate that never squeaked, stood a mansion made to look effortless. Pale walls smooth like bone. Gardens trimmed into strict shapes, as if even plants had to obey. There were no curtains on the wide windows. The rooms were meant to be seen. Inside lived the House of Lark. They were not royals, not officially. No crowns. No banners on the castle walls. But the city moved when they moved. Doors opened without hands touching them. Invitations arrived without anyone asking. People spoke the family name softly, the way you speak near a sleeping animal. The oldest son, Cashin Lark, stood in a long hallway full of portraits. The paintings were not just faces. They were promises. Each one showed a lark at the moment they had convinced the world they were needed. A grandfather holding a bottle with a label like a medal. An aunt smiling beside a stage, her hands raised as if blessing the crowd. A father shaking hands with a mayor who looked grateful to be allowed. Cashin watched them the way sailors watch a lighthouse. He was dressed neatly, hair combed like a rule, shoes polished until they could return a face. A servant passed with a tray. Cashin could smell citrus peel, ink, and something metallic that always hovered in the house, like coins warmed in a palm. In the study at the end of the hall, his father waited. Elias Lark did not like to be called powerful. He liked words that sounded helpful. Necessary. Responsible. Protective. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and patient, and it made people lean closer to hear him. If they leaned close enough, they started to believe. Cashin stepped into the study. It was a room built like a stage set for seriousness. Shelves full of books that looked unopened but expensive. A globe that did not spin. A heavy desk with no clutter, only a single fountain pen lying perfectly straight, as if it had been measured. Elias did not look up at first. He was reading a thin folder. His fingers turned pages without bending them. "Come in," he said, as if Cashin might have been a stranger. Then he lifted his eyes. "Sit." Cashin sat. Elias placed the folder down and folded his hands. His ring caught the light. It had the family crest on it, a simple mark carved into gold, a tower and a wing. A place to stand. A way to rise. "You know what people say about us," Elias said. Cashin nodded. "They say we build things. They say we fix things," Elias corrected gently. "A builder makes a mess first. A fixer arrives after the mess and makes it neat." Cashin felt the familiar tension in his chest, like a tie pulled too tight. "Yes." Elias watched him as if evaluating a product. "You want to lead the house one day?" Cashin did not answer quickly. In the Lark family, eagerness looked like weakness. Hunger was allowed only if it wore gloves. "I want to be useful," Cashin said. Elias smiled slightly, like a teacher hearing the correct answer. "Good. Then you will learn what the world really is." He reached into the drawer and brought out a small object wrapped in cloth. He set it on the desk between them. The cloth was gray and plain, but Cashin could tell something inside was hard and cold. Elias unwrapped it slowly. It was a vial. A small, clear tube with a stopper like dark rubber. Inside was a liquid that looked almost innocent, pale as watered milk. The glass was so clean it seemed unreal. On the vial was a label with a single word printed neatly. "Calm." Cashin stared. He had seen the word on posters at clinics. He had heard it in conversations at parties. A doctor once told his aunt, laughing, "Everyone wants calm. No one wants to pay for it, but everyone wants it." Elias tapped the vial with one finger. "This," he said, "is what keeps the city from tearing itself apart." Cashin swallowed. "It's medicine. It's mercy," Elias said, and his voice did not change. "People live in pain. They cannot work. They cannot love. They cannot sleep. We give them calm. We give them back their lives." Cashin leaned forward, drawn in despite himself. The vial was so small. How could it hold something that mattered to an entire city? Elias continued. "There are many medicines. Most are clumsy. They dull the mind. They turn the body into a slow machine. But this is refined." He lifted the vial and held it up to the light. The liquid caught a thin thread of sun and made it glow. "Our laboratories found a way," Elias said. A way to persuade the body. Not force it. Persuade it. To make pain quiet. Cashin felt his pulse quicken. In his mind he saw crowds of tired people, their faces lined with suffering, suddenly softening, their shoulders lowering. A gift like that would make the family not just rich, but untouchable. Elias set the vial down again, careful as if placing a jewel. There are rules, he said. A medicine like this can be misunderstood. People can become afraid. They can call it a trick. A danger. They can say the larks are taking advantage. Cashin's mouth tightened. Let them talk. Elias's gaze sharpened, and suddenly the warmth in the room felt like it had been turned down. No, he said quietly. You will never say that again. We do not let them talk. Cashin held still. Elias leaned forward. There is a difference between being right and being safe. The world does not reward the right. The world rewards the protected. Cashin looked down at the vial. The word calm stared back, perfectly printed. Elias's voice softened again. You will go to the factory district tomorrow. You will see how calm is made. You will meet the people who carry it into the clinics. You will learn their language. Their fears. Their hunger. Cashin nodded, though his throat felt dry. And, Elias added, you will meet Dr. Sable. The name landed in the room like a coin dropped into a deep well. Cashin had heard whispers of her. A scientist with hands that never shook. A woman who could stare at a problem for days without blinking, until it surrendered. Some said she was the only reason calm existed at all. Others said she was dangerous, because she believed the body was just a system of locks, and she carried too many keys. Cashin tried to keep his voice even. Why meet her now? Elias's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. Because she doesn't like you, he said. And the people who don't like you are the ones who can ruin you. Cashin felt a flicker of anger. She works for us. Elias reached out and placed his hand over the vial, covering the word as if hiding it from the air. No one works for us, he said. Not truly. People orbit us when we are strong. They fall away when we are not. Cashin stared at his father's hand. The skin looked smooth. The nails clean. A hand that had never hauled crates, never scrubbed floors, never stitched flesh. Yet it rested on the tiny bottle as if it owned relief itself. Elias withdrew his hand and stood, signaling the conversation was done. Remember, he said, walking around the desk. We are not a family that begs for permission. We are a family that offers help so the world can't say no. Cashin rose as well. He forced his face into calm, the lark expression, practiced in mirrors since childhood. As he turned to leave, Elias spoke again, almost casually. One more thing, he said. Cashin paused. Elias looked out the window, toward the city. In the distance, smoke rose from the factory district like gray ribbons. There have been stories, Elias said, as if choosing the word carefully. People who take calm and then want more. People who behave strangely when it is taken away. Cashin frowned. Side effects. Elias's head tilted slightly. Not a word you should use. Side effects make it sound like the medicine is guilty. We prefer to say complications. Misuse. Vulnerability. Cashin felt a chill. Is it happening often? Elias turned back. His eyes were very steady. Often enough that our enemies will try to make it a tale, he said. A scary tale that parents tell their children. A tale that makes the city bite the hand that feeds it. Cashin's mouth went dry again. He could suddenly picture newspapers splashed with black ink, the family name dragged through mud, the mansion on the hill surrounded not by admirers but by angry strangers. Elias stepped closer, and now he spoke as if the words were only for Cashin's bones to hear. If calm becomes a monster in their minds, he said, then we must become the heroes who slay it. Cashin's heart thudded. Elias placed a hand on Cashin's shoulder, firm. Go to the district, he said. Meet Dr. Sable. Learn what you need. And remember, the world is a room with no curtains. Every move you make will be seen. Cashin left the study and walked down the portrait hall again. The faces in the paintings seemed to follow him, not with warmth, but with expectation. In the foyer, he passed a mirrored wall. For a moment he saw himself double, then triple, caught at different angles. The same suit, the same controlled expression, the same polished mask. But behind the mask, something moved. Outside, the gate opened soundlessly, and Cashin stepped into the bright street. The city air smelled of sea salt and fresh bread from a nearby bakery. People laughed at cafe tables. A musician played a gentle song on a corner, the notes floating like feathers. It was hard to believe anything here could be wrong. Cashin walked toward his car, a sleek machine that hummed softly when it sensed him. As he reached for the handle, his phone vibrated in his pocket. One message. No name. No number that made sense. Just a line of text, short and sharp. If you're going to the district, don't drink what they offer you. And don't trust the calm in your own veins. Cashin stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then, from the hill, far below the mansion, he heard something he had never heard in this city of clean light. A siren. Low, urgent, rising like a warning cry. He looked toward the factory district, where smoke thickened in the sky, and for the first time he wondered whether calm was a gift at all, or a door that had been opened and could not be closed. Chapter 2: Smoke over the district. The road down from the hill felt like a descent into another world. The city's bright stones gave way to cracked pavement. The air changed, losing the clean bite of sea salt and taking on the heavy taste of oil and hot metal. Buildings leaned closer together here, as if they were tired of standing straight. Wires sagged overhead like tangled vines. Cashin sat in the back of the car, watching it all through tinted glass. The vehicle moved smoothly, quietly, as if it refused to admit the district was rough. The engine made a soft purr, polite as a servant. Outside, people walked with shoulders set in a different way than on the hill. They moved fast, eyes scanning corners, hands kept close to pockets. The siren he had heard earlier did not fade into memory. It seemed to echo in every narrow street, hidden in the clatter of carts and the clang of factory gates. Cashin touched his phone again, half expecting the strange message to vanish. It was still there. The words felt like grit under his tongue. Don't drink what they offer you. He looked up as the car turned into the main artery of the district. Ahead, the Lark factory rose like a fortress, all dark brick and steel ribs. Its chimneys exhaled steady smoke that drifted across the sky and stained the clouds. The building was vast enough to make the people around it look like ants. A fence circled it, topped with sharp metal points that gleamed in the weak sun. At the gate, guards stood in clean uniforms. Their faces were blank, their eyes alert. When the car approached, one of them raised a hand. The gate slid open with a grind of gears and a hiss of hydraulics. Cashin noticed the guards' hands were not on batons, but on small devices clipped to their belts, black boxes with buttons and tiny lights. Cashin had seen them before in the mansion, used to lock doors remotely or dim lights. Here they were used like weapons. Inside the fence, the factory yard was busy. Trucks rolled in and out, their sides painted with the Lark crest. Workers in gray uniforms carry crates stamped with the word calm in neat lettering. The crates looked like they held something fragile, but the workers moved them with practiced speed, as if they were handling bread, not relief. Cashin's car stopped near a side entrance. The driver stepped out, walked around, and opened Cashin's door with a small bow. Cashin stepped into the yard. Heat rose from the ground. The air smelled of disinfectant layered over sweat. Somewhere close, machinery thumped like a heartbeat. A man approached him quickly. He was thin, with sharp cheekbones and hair slicked back as if he feared a single strand out of place. His badge read Marin Operations. Mr. Lark, Marin said, smiling too hard. We've been expecting you. Cashin offered a nod that was neither warm nor cold. I'm here to see everything. Of course, Marin said. Everything we can show. Cashin caught the careful phrasing. He let it pass for now. Marin led him through the side entrance into a corridor washed in harsh white light. The floors were spotless, glossy. The walls were lined with posters showing smiling faces, a mother holding a child, an older man walking without a cane, a worker lifting a box with ease. Beneath each image was a slogan in calm blue letters. Relief is dignity. Pain is not a virtue. Calm brings you back. Cashin felt the posters were too cheerful for a place that smelled like bleach. He glanced at Marin's face and saw sweat gathering at his hairline, though the corridor was cool. They passed through a set of doors that opened with the press of Marin's thumb on a scanner. Beyond was the main production hall. Cashin stopped without meaning to. The hall was enormous, filled with metal platforms, pipes, glass tanks, and conveyor belts that moved with steady patience. Workers in masks and gloves moved like parts of a larger machine. Overhead, robotic arms swung gracefully, pouring clear liquid into vials that glittered under the lights. Each vial slid along, was capped, labeled, and packed, all with a rhythm that felt almost soothing. It was beautiful in a cold way, order imposed on chaos. Marin's voice became reverent, as if he were showing Cashin a cathedral. This is where calm is born. Cashin walked forward slowly, taking in details. The sound was constant, a soft hiss, a click, a whir. It reminded him of the Lark Mansion's quiet systems, doors that opened on their own, lights that adjusted. The same kind of control. He stopped near a glass window that looked into a smaller room. Inside, a group of technicians in darker uniforms stood around a table. Their movements were careful, almost nervous. One of them held a vial up to the light and examined it as if searching for a flaw invisible to the eye. "What's that?" Cashin asked. Marin hesitated, then smiled again. "Quality checks," he said quickly. "We take pride in safety." Cashin watched the technicians. One of them reached for a small device and inserted a needle into a vial. The liquid inside shimmered for a moment, as if reacting. Cashin's skin prickled. "Why does it look like that?" Marin's smile tightened. "Sometimes the mixture settles," he said. "But it's all within acceptable." A new sound cut through the hall. A sharper noise, like a cry stifled behind a wall. Cashin turned his head. "What was that?" Marin stepped slightly in front of him, blocking his view down the hall. "Nothing. Just a machine venting pressure." But Cashin could tell it wasn't a machine. The sound had a shape, a human shape. He moved around Marin and walked toward the far end of the production hall, where the lighting dimmed and the air grew warmer. Marin followed, his footsteps quick. "Mr. Lark," Marin said, voice still polite but strained. "That area is restricted." Cashin did not slow. "Restricted from whom?" "Visitors," Marin said. "It's specialized." Cashin reached a door marked with a simple symbol, a wing crossed with a line. He pushed it. The door did not open. A lock clicked, and a red light blinked above the handle. Cashin looked back at Marin. "Open it." Marin's throat bobbed. "I can't." Cashin stepped closer. "You can't," he said softly. "You don't want to." For a moment, Marin's mask slipped. Fear showed through, quick as a flash of lightning. Before Cashin could press further, another figure approached from behind, footsteps steady, unhurried. Cashin turned. A woman walked toward him with the calm of someone who did not need permission to exist. She wore a dark coat instead of the factory gray. Her hair was pulled back, neat but not decorative. Her face was pale under the harsh lights, her eyes dark and focused like polished stone. "Dr. Sable." She stopped at a respectful distance from Cashin, though there was nothing respectful in her expression. She looked him over the way a surgeon looks at a wound. "So," she said, voice even, "Elias finally sent his son." Cashin held her gaze. "He sent me to learn." Dr. Sable's mouth barely moved, almost a smile but sharper. "He sent you to be impressed." Marin made a small sound, as if he wished he could disappear. "Doctor, I was just—" "Go," Sable said without looking at him. Marin hesitated. Dr. Sable finally turned her eyes toward him, and the air seemed to tighten. Marin nodded quickly and retreated, practically fleeing. Now it was just Cashin and Sable, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the smell of sterile air. Cashin gestured toward the locked door. "What's behind it?" Sable glanced at it, then back at him. "You want the pretty tur or the true tur?" Cashin's jaw clenched. "True." Sable studied him for a long moment. "You look like your father," she said quietly. "Same careful face. Same belief that the world is a board game and people are pieces." Cashin felt heat rise in his neck. "I'm not here to be insulted." Sable's eyes did not soften. "Then don't ask questions you don't want answered." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small keycard. It was not labeled with a name, only a black stripe and a tiny symbol, an eye. She slid it through the scanner beside the door. The red light turned green. The lock clicked. Cashin's stomach tightened. He remembered the anonymous message. "Don't drink what they offer you." Sable opened the door and stepped through without waiting to see if he followed. Cashin followed. The air inside was warmer, thicker. The lighting was dimmer, more yellow, as if even the bulbs were tired. The corridor beyond was narrower, the walls scuffed. The smell changed too, less disinfectant, more human. Sweat. Old cloth. Something sour. They walked past another door, this one with a small window. Cashin looked through. Inside was a room with a chair bolted to the floor. Straps hung from its arms. A tray of instruments sat nearby. Not surgical instruments, wires, sensors, clamps. The room looked like something built to test, not to heal. Cashin's mouth went dry. "What is this?" Sable did not slow. "This is where calm becomes profitable," she said. Cashin stopped. The machinery hum seemed farther away now, as if they had stepped into the factory's throat. "People think medicine is discovered," Sable continued, turning back to face him. "They imagine a lucky genius, a bright idea, a pure cure. That is a bedtime story. Medicine is engineered. It is pushed and pulled until it fits into the shape of a market. Cashin's hands curled slightly. We help people. Sable's eyes held his like a clamp. Yes, she said. And you build a world where they can't live without what you sell. Cashin felt anger rise, but beneath it was something else. A thin thread of unease. Sable walked to the window door and tapped the glass. In that chair, she said, we learn how much calm it takes to silence a body. How long it lasts. What happens when it fades. Cashin stared at the straps. Who sits there? Sable's voice stayed level. Volunteers, she said, and the words sounded wrong in her mouth. Cashin looked back at her. Are they paid? Sable paused, just slightly. Some. Cashin felt his stomach twist. And the rest? Sable's gaze flicked away for the first time, toward the end of the corridor where another door stood. That door was heavier than the others, reinforced with metal bars. A small slot was cut into it, like the kind used to pass food into a cell. Cashin's heart thudded. What's in there? Sable walked toward it. You shouldn't go in. Cashin followed anyway. When Sable reached the door, she did not use her keycard. She placed her palm on a panel beside it. The panel lit up and scanned her hand, tracing lines and heat. The door unlocked with a deeper click, like a jaw opening. Sable hesitated, then pushed it open. The room beyond was not a lab. It was a holding room, bare and grim. The walls were thick concrete. A drain sat in the center of the floor. Along one wall were thin mattresses, stained and worn. In the corner, a bucket. The air was heavy with the smell of bodies that had been kept too long in too little space. Cashin stepped inside and felt the temperature drop, not from cold but from absence. Absence of dignity, absence of care. There were people in the room. Not many. A handful. They sat or lay in strange postures, their limbs restless, their faces drawn tight. One man rocked back and forth, whispering something Cashin couldn't make out. A woman pressed her forehead to the wall, breathing hard as if fighting an invisible wave. Another person scratched at their own arm until the skin was raw, eyes wide with panic. Cashin froze. Their eyes turned toward him, not with recognition but with hunger. Not for food. For calm. One of them lurched forward, crawling, hands scraping the floor. Their voice came out ragged. Please, they croaked. Please, just a little. Cashin stumbled back instinctively, horrified. He had never seen need like this. Not polite need. Not dignified suffering. This was need that had stripped the skin off shame and left only raw desire. Sable stood behind him, watching the scene without flinching, but there was something tight in her jaw. Cashin turned on her. What is this? Sable's voice was quiet. This is what happens when the body learns a new kind of silence, she said. And then that silence is taken away. Cashin's head spun. Why are they here? Sable's eyes narrowed. Because if they were outside, she said, it would become a story your father cannot control. Cashin felt the room tilt. He thought of the posters in the bright corridor. Smiling faces. Clean slogans. He thought of his father's hand covering the vial on the desk, hiding the word as if hiding guilt. The crawling person reached for Cashin's shoe, fingers trembling. Cashin jerked back, throat tight. Sable stepped forward then and crouched, her movements practiced. She pulled a small spray vial from her pocket, different from the factory vials. Unlabeled. She pressed it near the person's mouth and released a fine mist. The person's whole body shuddered. Their eyes rolled back for a moment, then softened. Their breathing slowed. Their shoulders dropped as if a heavy weight had been lifted off their bones. Cashin stared. You carry it with you. Sable stood. I carry what I need, she said. Cashin's voice shook despite his effort to steady it. Is this common? Sable looked at him, and something like exhaustion flashed across her face. Common enough, she said. And growing. Cashin backed toward the door. My father said there were stories. Complications. Sable's lips pressed together. Your father chooses words the way others choose weapons, she said. He calls it misuse so he can blame the person who suffers. Cashin felt a surge of nausea. He wanted to leave, to get air, to scrub the smell of this room from his lungs. But he couldn't stop staring at the people on the mattresses, at their trembling hands, at the way their eyes followed Sable's pocket as if it held salvation. Cashin turned to Sable again. Why show me this? Sable held his gaze. Because you're here, she said. Because the house likes to pretend it has no curtains, but it does. Thick ones. Heavy ones. And I'm tired of working in the dark. Cashin's mind raced. If this was happening, the city could find out. The family could be ruined. Or worse, people could be harmed in ways Cashin couldn't even imagine spreading across streets like fire. He looked at Sable. What do you want? Sable's eyes flicked toward the slot in the door, toward the people, toward the drain in the floor. When she spoke, her voice had a different edge, less cold, more urgent. I want you to understand, she said. Calm is not just a product. It is a gate. Once opened, it changes the land on both sides. Cashin took a step back into the corridor. The hum of the factory returned, louder now, as if welcoming him back into its clean lie. Sable closed the door behind them. The lock clanged shut like a verdict. They walked back down the narrow corridor, Cashin's thoughts spinning, his skin crawling as if the desperation in that room had reached into him and left fingerprints. At the end of the corridor, before the brighter hall, Sable stopped. There's something else, she said. Cashin looked at her, wary. What? Sable reached into her coat again and pulled out a thin file. Not the kind Elias had shown. This one looked old, the edges worn, as if it had been opened and closed too many times in secret. She held it out to Cashin. Your father hasn't told you where Calm really came from, she said. Not the lab story. The other story. Cashin hesitated, then took it. The paper felt heavier than it should. What is this? He asked. Sable's eyes locked onto his. Names, she said. People who disappeared into the process. People whose pain bought your family's comfort. Cashin's fingers tightened around the file. Why give this to me? Sable leaned closer, and her voice dropped until it was almost swallowed by the machinery. Because someone is already telling the story outside, she said. And they're not using your father's words. Cashin opened his mouth to ask who, but before he could, a new sound rose from the main hall. Not the steady hum of machines. A shout. Then another. Then the unmistakable crash of something heavy hitting the floor. Cashin and Sable both turned toward the noise. From the bright corridor ahead, a worker stumbled into view, mask hanging off one ear, eyes wide with terror. He looked at Cashin as if seeing him was both hope and doom. They're at the gate, the worker gasped. They're screaming your name. They want Calm. They want blood. Cashin felt the file in his hand like a burning coal. Outside, through the factory's high windows, smoke thickened, and in it, he could see movement, a mass gathering like a storm. Chapter 3. The Crowd That Learned a Name. Cashin moved before his thoughts could catch up. His feet carried him down the corridor toward the main hall, the file clenched in his hand, knuckles tight enough to ache. Dr. Sable walked at his side, her pace steady, her face unreadable, but her eyes flicked toward every camera in the ceiling like she was counting them. As they stepped into the bright production hall again, the rhythm had changed. The machine still hissed and clicked, but the workers were no longer moving in their calm, practiced flow. People were pausing, heads turned toward the yard, hands hovering over crates and conveyor belts as if unsure whether to keep working or run. A supervisor shouted something Cashin couldn't hear over the rising noise. The sound from outside was swelling, voices, many voices, blending into a rough roar. Marin appeared again, pale and sweating. He ran toward Cashin, but when he saw Dr. Sable, he slowed as if a wall had risen between them. Mr. Lark, Marin said, breathless. We should get you out. Now. Cashin kept walking. What's happening? Marin swallowed. There's a crowd. They're at the outer fence. They pushed through the first barricade. Cashin's stomach clenched. Why? Marin's eyes darted to the posters on the walls, to the crates marked Calm, as if the answer was written everywhere. They say the clinics are empty, he said. They say the distributors are hoarding. They say their families are in pain. Cashin's mind flashed to the holding room. To the crawling hands. To the way the mist had softened the person's face like a spell. Are the clinics empty? Cashin asked. Marin's mouth opened, then closed. We've had adjustments, he said carefully. A temporary slowdown. Quality protocols. Dr. Sable made a small sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so cold. Cashin turned on Marin. Answer me. Marin's voice dropped. There was a batch, he said. A small one. That didn't behave as expected. It made people agitated. We pulled shipments. We had to. The council would ask questions. Sable finished for him. Her eyes were sharp. And your house hates questions. Marin flinched. Doctor, please. Cashin felt the file pressing against his palm. Names inside. Disappeared people. He wanted to open it right there, to see if the truth had teeth. But the roar outside was growing louder, and now he could hear individual words breaking through. "Come! Lark! Open it! My child!" The last one hit Cashin hardest. It wasn't just anger. It was desperation. The kind that doesn't ask permission. A crash sounded from the yard, metal bending. Workers gasped. Someone screamed. Cashin moved toward the wide doors that led outside. Marin rushed ahead, blocking him with both arms. "You can't go out there," Marin said, voice trembling. "They'll tear you apart." Cashin stared at him. "Is that what you think of them?" Marin's eyes flickered. "It's what I know of crowds," he whispered. "They don't see a person. They see a symbol." Cashin pushed past him. "Then I'll make them see a person." Dr. Sable's hand caught Cashin's sleeve for the briefest moment. Her grip was firm, her fingers cold. "Careful," she said quietly. "A crowd is a mind without a skull. It doesn't feel pain the way an individual does. It doesn't regret." Cashin looked at her. "Do you regret?" For a heartbeat, something moved behind her eyes, something like fatigue, like a memory she didn't want to touch. Then it was gone. "I regret wasting time," she said. "Go." Cashin reached the doors. 2 guards in clean uniforms stood there, hands on their belt devices. Their faces were tense. "Mr. Lark," one of them said, "we can escort you out through the rear." Cashin shook his head. "Open the doors." The guards exchanged a glance. "Sir, that's unsafe." Cashin's voice hardened. "Open them." The guard hesitated, then pressed a button. The doors unlatched with a heavy clunk and began to slide apart. Sound rushed in like a flood. The yard was chaos. People pressed against the outer fence, faces distorted by rage and fear. Some had climbed the metal mesh, hands bleeding where the wire cut them. Others shook the bars, making the whole structure rattle and groan. A few had makeshift signs, pieces of cardboard with smeared words. Cashin caught fragments. "Give it back. You did this. We're dying awake." The smoke from the chimneys hung low, mixing with the dust kicked up by stomping feet. The air tasted like panic. Between the crowd and the factory's inner yard stood another line of guards, this one in heavier gear. They held shields. Behind them were barricades that looked like they had been placed quickly, not confidently. One barricade had already tipped, crushed under the pressure of bodies. Cashin stepped out into the yard. For a moment, the noise faltered. It didn't stop, but it wavered, like a wave hesitating before breaking. Some faces turned toward him. Eyes narrowed. People pointed. A murmur ran through the crowd, spreading fast. "That's him. That's a lark. They came down. They think they can watch from above." Cashin felt hundreds of gazes hit him like stones. He raised his hands, palms open, a gesture he had seen politicians use when they wanted to look harmless. "I'm Cashin Lark," he called, forcing his voice to carry. "I'm here to listen." A harsh laugh rang out from somewhere in the crowd. "Listen?" someone shouted. "We've been talking for ages." Another voice, cracked with strain. "My mother can't stand. We went to the clinic and they said there's nothing left." A man near the front, face gray with exhaustion, shook the fence and screamed. "You made it so we can't sleep without it." The words stabbed Cashin in the ribs. He remembered Sable's line, a gate. Once opened, the land changes. Cashin tried again. There was a "Lies!" a woman screamed, and her voice was so raw Cashin thought her throat might tear. "You always have a story! You always have a reason!" Someone threw something. It hit the ground near Cashin's feet and shattered. A glass bottle. The smell that rose was sharp and sour. The guards shifted, shields lifting. Cashin's heart hammered. He could feel the crowd's mood turning, rolling toward violence. He had wanted to be seen as a person, but Marin had been right. They saw a symbol. They saw the crest on his chest, invisible but present. Cashin took a step forward anyway, closer to the barricade line. "I can't fix it if I don't understand," he shouted. "Understand this!" A voice bellowed, and a man surged forward, slamming his shoulder into the fence with a wild strength. The wire bowed. The top spikes trembled. The guards tensed, ready to strike. Cashin's mind raced. He needed to calm them, but how do you calm people who have learned the taste of calm and had it taken away? How do you tell them to be patient when their bodies are screaming? He turned his head slightly, searching for Sable. She stood just inside the doorway, watching with a stillness that felt like calculation. Cashin remembered the mist vial in her pocket. He stepped back toward her, keeping his hands visible. The crowd hissed as he moved, as if sensing retreat. Sable met him halfway, her eyes narrowing. "Don't," she said. Cashin lowered his voice. "You have calm. Give it to them." Sable's jaw tightened. "If you feed a fire with oil, it burns brighter." Cashin's voice shook with urgency. "They're going to break through." Sable looked past him at the crowd. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers flexed slightly near her coat pocket. "If I give them enough to soften them," she said, "they will want more. They will learn that rage gets rewarded." Cashin felt anger spark. "So what? We let them suffer to teach them manners." Sable's eyes snapped to his. "We let them see the truth," she hissed. "The truth is there isn't enough. Not without making more people like the ones you saw in the holding room." Cashin's breath caught. The holding room. The straps. The drain. Before he could answer, the crowd surged again. The fence groaned loudly. One of the top spikes bent. Someone screamed, not in anger but in pure, animal panic. A guard shouted orders. Shields slammed together. The line braced. Then, from somewhere within the crowd, a small figure pushed forward, thin, moving with frantic purpose. A child, face smudged with dirt, eyes too bright. The child slipped through a gap near the front, where the fence had bowed and pulled away from its post. Suddenly the child was inside the outer barrier, stumbling into the space between the fence and the guards. The crowd erupted. "No! Get back!" The guards froze for a split second, not expecting innocents to breach the line. Cashin's chest tightened. The child looked around, terrified, then saw Cashin. For a moment their eyes met. The child's expression wasn't hatred. It was pleading. It was the same hunger Cashin had seen in the holding room, but with something else layered over it, trust, the last fragile kind. The child took a step toward Cashin, hands outstretched as if reaching for a lifeline. A guard moved, instinctive, raising a shield to block the child from rushing forward. The motion was too fast, too forceful. The child stumbled backward, fell hard onto the ground. Time seemed to slow. Cashin saw the child's palms scrape the rough pavement. He saw the child's face twist in pain. He saw the crowd's collective breath catch, then turn into a roar so loud it shook the yard. "You hit a child! Monsters! Open it now!" Cashin's blood went cold. He could feel the moment tipping, the way a cart tips when one wheel leaves the road. He sprinted forward. The guards shouted, reaching for him, but Cashin pushed past them and dropped to his knees beside the child. The child's eyes were wide, wet, furious with fear. "Please," the child whispered, voice thin. "My father, he's shaking. He's not himself. They said you have it." Cashin's throat tightened so hard he could barely breathe. He looked up at the crowd beyond the fence. Faces contorted. Tears cutting lines through grime. Hands reaching through wire like claws. Behind him, Sable's footsteps approached, measured. Cashin turned his head. "Help," he said, the word coming out like a crack. Sable crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the child quickly, professionally. She pulled out her small spray vial. Cashin watched, torn between relief and dread. Sable held the mist near the child's face. The child flinched, then froze, sensing what it was. Sable hesitated. For the first time, her hand shook, just a fraction. Cashin saw it. The crowd pressed harder against the fence, as if they could smell calm on the air. Sable's gaze lifted, meeting the crowd not as people but as a force. Her voice was low, only for Cashin. "If I do this here," she said, "they will never stop coming." Cashin's eyes burned. "Then what do we do?" Sable's answer was a whisper that sounded like a door closing. "We choose who gets to stay human," she said, and pressed the spray. A fine mist touched the child's lips. The child's body shuddered once, then softened. The terror drained from their face like water pulled down a sink. Their breathing slowed. Their eyes blinked, calmer now, almost dreamy. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Not anger, hope. Hunger sharpening into certainty. They saw it. They saw calm work. A chant began, low at first, then spreading. "Calm! Calm! Calm!" It wasn't a request. It was a demand, a spell spoken by too many mouths. Cashin stood slowly, the child limp but peaceful in his arms. He looked at Sable, horror and gratitude twisting together. Sable rose too, her face tight. "Now they know," she said. Cashin turned toward the factory doors behind them. He could see workers peering out, faces pale. He could see guards adjusting their grips on shields, preparing for impact. The crowd surged like a living tide. The fence snapped with a sharp metallic scream. Bodies poured through. Cashin took a step back, clutching the child, and felt the yard fill with a sound that was not a siren, not machinery, but a single furious will. In that roar, Cashin heard his own name swallowed and remade into something else. Not a person. A target. And as the first wave of desperate hands reached for him, Cashin realized the anonymous message had not been a warning about a drink. It had been a warning about a world that had learned how to want. Chapter 4. The Room Beneath the Floor. The first hands that reached Cashin were not claws, not weapons. They were hands that had held babies and tools and blankets. Hands that had trembled through sleepless nights. Hands that had once been steady. But desperation changes the shape of touch. Cashin backed away, the child pressed tight against his chest. The child's head lolled softly, calm settling over them like a heavy shawl. Their eyelids fluttered. They looked safe for the first time, and that safety made the crowd's hunger sharper. A calm child was proof. Proof meant hope. Hope meant more people would risk anything. Inside! A guard shouted. Another guard stepped in front of Cashin with a shield, shoving bodies back as they surged through the broken fence. The shield thudded against ribs. A man stumbled, eyes wild, and caught himself on the edge of the barricade. A woman's scream cut through the air like a blade. Cashin turned toward the doors. Dr. Sable grabbed his sleeve and yanked him hard. Not that way, she said. Cashin blinked at her. The factory. They'll follow you through the factory, she snapped. They'll tear apart every crate. They'll crush each other to get it. And the guards will respond like guards do. Cashin looked back at the crowd. More bodies spilled in, faces twisted, mouths open in a chant that had become a single word. Calm. 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 His pulse beat in his throat. Then where? Sable pointed not toward the main doors, but toward a smaller side entrance partially hidden by stacked pallets and a parked truck. There, she said. Now. She moved fast, not running like someone afraid, but moving like someone who had already planned for collapse. Cashin followed, the driverless instincts of the lark life abandoned. His shoes slid on grit. A thrown bottle shattered near his feet, spraying sour liquid onto his pant leg. He didn't stop. A guard ran alongside them, barking into a radio. Breach! Inner yard compromised! Secure the vault! Vault. The word hit Cashin like cold water. Sable shoved through the side entrance and into a narrow service corridor. The light here was dim and tinted green, like the glow inside an aquarium. Pipes ran along the ceiling. The air was cooler, damp. Cashin's lungs burned. He could still hear the roar outside, muffled now but growing, like thunder behind a wall. Sable led them down a flight of metal stairs that rang underfoot. The sound of their steps echoed, sharp and lonely. At the bottom was a door with no label, only a thick wheel handle like the hatch of a ship. Sable spun the wheel quickly. Cashin watched her hands, precise, strong. She hauled the door open. A smell rose up, metallic and stale, like old coins left in rain. They stepped through. The space beyond was a room beneath the factory floor. Not a basement like the mansion's wine cellar. This was a place built to be forgotten. The ceiling was low, the walls raw concrete. Thick cables ran along the edges like veins. A single row of harsh lights buzzed overhead. The room was filled with shelves. On those shelves sat crates upon crates, all stamped with the lark crest and the word calm. Cashin's breath caught. It was like walking into a hoard. A treasure room. A dragon's nest, except the treasure wasn't gold. It was relief. Sable slammed the hatch behind them and spun the wheel until it locked with a final clang. For a second, the silence was shocking. The roar outside was now only a distant vibration. Cashin shifted the child in his arms. The child murmured softly, as if in a dream. A guard stood near the shelves, rifle slung across his chest. His face was tight with alarm. Doctor, he said. Sir? You shouldn't be here. Cashin stared at the crates. How much is this? The guard hesitated, then glanced at Sable as if she were the real authority. Enough, he said finally, voice flat. Enough for the city to stay quiet, if it were released. Cashin felt something hot rise in him, fury mixed with shame. He thought of the crowd outside, of the mother screaming, of the man shaking the fence. The clinics are empty, he said, voice low. And this is sitting here. Sable's eyes flicked over the shelves. It's not sitting, she said. It's waiting. Waiting for what? Cashin demanded. Sable's jaw tightened. Waiting for permission, she said. Waiting for the right story. Waiting until the risk is lower. Cashin looked at her sharply. Your risk? Sable's gaze didn't break. Your father's risk, she corrected. And now, perhaps yours. The guard shifted his stance uneasily. He looked like a man trained to be calm in emergencies, but even he was unsettled by the pressure in the air, as if the room itself held its breath. Cashin looked down at the child. The child's face was smooth now, peaceful, but too still, like a candle flame sheltered from wind. Cashin had seen calm soothe panic in seconds. The speed of it was both miracle and threat. He remembered the holding room, the scratching hands, the hollow eyes. He remembered Sable saying the land changes on both sides of the gate. What happens if they get into this room? Cashin asked, voice tight. The guard's eyes flicked to the hatch overhead. They won't, he said too quickly. A distant thud reverberated through the ceiling. Dust shook loose from a corner and drifted down like gray snow. Sable's eyes narrowed. They might, she said. Cashin's mouth went dry. Then what do we do? Sable walked to a crate and rested her hand on it. Her fingers traced the stamped letters as if reading them in braille. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, almost intimate. This is the heart, she said. And hearts are protected by ribs. By guards. By lies. By locked doors. Cashin stepped closer, staring at her hand on the crate. You're saying we lie? Sable looked at him as if he were slow. We already do, she said. Cashin flinched. In the mansion, lies were called discretion. Here, in this concrete room, the word felt uglier. Another thud overhead. Louder. Closer. The guard swore under his breath and lifted his radio again. Static crackled, then a voice shouted through it, distorted. Inner hall compromised. They're pushing into production. We need reinforcements. Cashin's blood chilled. They're inside? Sable closed her eyes for a moment, as if calculating routes, outcomes, casualties. When she opened them, she looked older, not by years but by weight. They'll tear the place apart, she said. Cashin's mind flashed to the conveyor belts, the glass tanks, the robotic arms. To the technicians in the quality room. To the straps. And if they take it, Cashin said, they'll destroy themselves. Sable's gaze was hard. Not intentionally, she said. But yes. Cashin looked around the vault-like room. The shelves of calm felt less like treasure now and more like ammunition. The anonymous message came back to him like a ghost hand on his neck. Don't trust the calm in your own veins. Cashin realized he had never taken calm. Not directly. The Larks didn't do that. They didn't need to. Pain was for other people. But the message hadn't said anything about taking calm. It had said not to trust it. As if calm could move through a family without being swallowed. Cashin turned to Sable. You said my father hasn't told me the real origin, he said, touching the file still tucked under his arm. What is it? Sable's eyes flicked to the file. Read it, she said. Cashin shifted the child carefully, lowering them onto a folded coat Sable spread on the floor. The child sighed softly, calm holding them like a spell. Cashin knelt and opened the file. Inside were pages filled with names written in neat rows. Some names had notes beside them, short phrases, cold as labels on jars. Trial subject. Unstable reaction. Transferred. Non-compliant. Cashin's stomach turned. He flipped another page. There were photographs. Grainy, taken quickly. Faces in harsh light. Eyes staring at the camera like trapped animals. One photo showed a man strapped to the chair Cashin had seen through the window, his mouth open in a silent scream. Cashin's hands trembled. This is from here. Sable crouched beside him. Her voice was flat. Early work, she said. Before the posters. Before the slogans. Before the city started calling you saviors. Cashin swallowed hard. Why would my father allow this? Sable's eyes didn't blink. Because pain was the raw material, she said. And he believed he could refine it into profit. Cashin's head spun. He thought of Elias in the study, holding up the vial like a jewel, saying it was mercy. Cashin had wanted to believe him. It had been easier than thinking of straps and drains. Another thud overhead, followed by the distinct screech of metal tearing. The guard went pale. They're breaking the inner doors, he muttered. Cashin snapped the file shut and stood. We need to get calm to the clinics, he said, voice urgent. Now. Open these crates, send them out. Stop this. The guard stared at him as if he'd spoken madness. I can't, he said. There are orders. Cashin's voice sharpened. From who? The guard hesitated, then said the name like it was a prayer and a chain. Elias. Cashin felt the ground tilt. His father had locked Calm away while the city burned for it. Not because there wasn't enough, but because it wasn't safe. Not for the people. For the house. Sable watched Cashin's face change. You're starting to see it, she said quietly. Cashin turned on her, anger flaring. You helped make this. Sable's eyes hardened. Yes, she said simply. And that's why I'm still alive. And why you're down here with me instead of upstairs being torn apart. Cashin opened his mouth to respond, but a new sound came through the ceiling. Not a thud. A rhythmic pounding, deliberate. Like someone striking a metal door with a tool, again and again, searching for a weakness. The hatch above them vibrated slightly. The guard raised his rifle, aiming up at the ceiling as if he could shoot through concrete. Sable's gaze narrowed. They don't know this room exists, she murmured. Cashin's throat went tight. Then who's pounding? Sable stepped toward the wall and pressed her ear against it, listening. Her face went still. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she straightened, eyes sharp. That's not the crowd, she said. That's someone who knows exactly where to hit. Cashin felt cold spread through his chest. Someone inside the company. Sable didn't answer directly. She walked to a corner of the room where a small console sat, an old control panel with switches and a screen that glowed faintly. She tapped a sequence quickly. A camera feed flickered on the screen. The image was grainy, but clear enough. It showed the corridor above, the service stairwell. A figure stood there, not in factory gray, not in guard uniform. A dark coat, hood up, face hidden. The figure lifted something heavy, an industrial cutter, its blade shining under the corridor light. Cashin stared. Who is that? Sable's voice was a whisper that tasted like fear. I don't know, she said. And that's the problem. On the screen, the hooded figure placed the cutter against the hatch mechanism and began to slice. Sparks flew. The metal groaned. And from the other side of the hatch, faint but growing, Cashin could hear voices, not the roar of a crowd, but the close, ragged breathing of someone about to break in. Sable looked at Cashin, her eyes suddenly fierce. If they get in here, she said, it won't be a riot. Cashin swallowed. What will it be? Sable's gaze flicked to the shelves of Calm, then back to him. A harvest, she said. And the hatch above them shuddered again, the lock beginning to give. Chapter 5, The Mask Maker. The hatch screamed. Metal bent with a sound like a wounded animal, and a shower of bright sparks fell through the seam. The guard fired a warning shot into the ceiling without thinking, the crack deafening in the low room. Dust rained down. The child on the floor stirred, whimpering softly, then settled again under the spell of calm. Dr. Sable didn't flinch at the gunshot. She grabbed Cashin's wrist and pulled him away from the center of the room, toward the shelves where the shadows were deeper. Don't waste bullets, she hissed at the guard. If they cut through, you'll need them for what comes next. The guard's mouth worked, his eyes fixed upward. Who the hell is that? He whispered. Cashin stared at the flickering camera feed. The hooded figure's movements were skilled, almost gentle, as if they cared about the machine they were using. The industrial cutter bit into the hatch's lock housing with patience. Not rage. Not panic. Purpose. The pounding from above wasn't frantic anymore. It was methodical. A craftsman's rhythm. Cashin's mind raced through possibilities. A rival company. A rogue employee. Someone sent by the council. Someone from the crowd who had learned too much, too fast. Sable moved to the console again, fingers flying across switches. The camera feed shifted, jumped to another angle. This view showed the figure's hands more clearly. They wore gloves, dark and tight. On one wrist was a thin band that caught the light, metal, etched with a familiar symbol. A tower and a wing. Cashin's stomach dropped. That's our crest. The guard's eyes widened. Impossible. Sable's face tightened. Not impossible, she said quietly. Just inconvenient. Cashin swallowed. An insider. Sable didn't answer. She was watching the hands, the posture, the way the figure leaned into the work. Something in her expression sharpened, as if she recognized the style. That's not a thief, she murmured. That's a messenger. Cashin looked at her. For who? Before she could reply, the cutter found a weak point. The hatch buckled inward. The wheel handle twisted by itself as the lock housing tore. The entire door shuddered and sagged, held only by stubborn metal. The guard raised his rifle again, aiming directly at the seam. Cashin felt his breath go shallow. If the door opened and the guard fired, the intruder might fall into the room bleeding, right on top of the crates. One stray shot could puncture a vial, spill calm into the air, into skin, into mouths. Chaos with a sweet, invisible scent. Sable grabbed the rifle barrel and shoved it down. "Not yet," she said. The guard snarled. "Doctor." Sable's eyes flashed. "If you shoot and miss, and your bullet hits the stock, your family will be the least of your problems. Lower it." The guard hesitated, then lowered the rifle a fraction, muscles trembling. Cashin stepped closer to the hatch, stopping at a distance. "Who are you?" he called upward, voice echoing. The cutter stopped. For a moment, there was only the buzz of the overhead lights and the distant muffled roar of the riot somewhere above the factory floor. Then the figure spoke, voice filtered through the hatch seam, calm in a way that made Cashin's skin crawl. "You shouldn't be down there," the figure said. "It's a room that makes honest men dishonest." Cashin's mouth went dry. "How do you know me?" A soft sound came through the seam, almost a chuckle. "Everyone knows the larks," the figure said. "Even when the larks think they're hidden." Sable stepped forward, chin lifted. "Enough," she called. "Show your face." The figure paused. Then, slowly, they peeled back the hood. The camera feed caught a glimpse, not a face, but a mask, smooth, pale, featureless except for the suggestion of cheekbones and a delicate mouth. No eyes, only dark lenses. It looked like a human face that had been sanded down and rebuilt to be unreadable. Cashin's stomach tightened. "Who wears something like that?" Sable's voice went low. "Someone who doesn't want to be seen by the cameras," she said. The masked figure spoke again. "Dr. Sable," they said, and the way they said her name was intimate, like they'd tasted it before. "Still polishing the blade you forged?" Sable's fingers curled. "Who sent you?" The masked figure tilted their head. "Someone who understands stories," they said. "Someone who knows a riot is not just a riot. It's an opening." Cashin felt a cold thread of understanding. "You want the stock," he said. "You want to take calm." The masked figure's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "The city wants calm," they said. "The city is starving. Your house is sitting on a feast. I'm just opening the pantry." Sable's eyes narrowed. "If you open it, people will die." The masked figure's shoulders rose slightly in a shrug. "People are dying already," they replied. "The difference is who gets blamed." Cashin's hands clenched. "What do you want from us?" The masked figure turned their head slightly, as if listening to something unseen. Cashin imagined an earpiece under the mask, a voice giving instructions. The figure spoke again, and this time their words were directed at Cashin with unsettling directness. "I want you to choose," they said. "Choose who you are when the house's walls start to crack." Cashin's throat tightened. "This isn't a game." "It's always a game," the masked figure said. "Your father taught the city that. He just doesn't like when someone else plays." Sable moved closer to the hatch, voice sharp. "Stop talking in riddles. Tell me your name." The masked figure was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, as if offering a gift, they said, "They call me the Mask Maker." Cashin felt his skin prickle. It sounded like a myth, a figure from a cautionary tale. A person who could change faces, change blame, change truth. Sable's eyes flicked to Cashin. "Step back," she said under her breath. Cashin didn't move. "Why are you here?" he demanded upward. The mask maker's voice dropped, as if speaking to someone kneeling beside a bed. "Because your father is about to sacrifice you," they said. Cashin froze. "What?" The mask maker continued, voice smooth. "He needs a face to show the city," they said. "A young, clean face. A son who can take the stain while the father stays pure." Cashin's mouth went dry. He imagined Elias in his study, looking out at the city, thinking in careful shapes. Elias had always spoken about protection. About safety. Cashin had assumed the family would protect him. But protection, Elias had said, was what the world rewarded, not what it offered. Sable's jaw tightened. "You don't know Elias," she said upward, but her voice lacked certainty. The mask maker laughed softly. "I know Elias very well," they said. "I know how he sleeps at night. I know which lies he tells himself so he can eat breakfast." Cashin felt anger surge, but it tangled with fear. He looked at Sable. "Is it true?" he whispered. Sable's eyes didn't meet his. "Your father doesn't like loose ends," she said quietly. "And you are new string." Cashin stared at her, stunned. "You think he'd Another vibration rolled through the ceiling. The riot above was intensifying. Shouts, crashes, the dull thud of bodies hitting doors. A siren wailed again, closer now, then cut off abruptly, as if someone had silenced it. The mask maker spoke quickly now. "They're almost through the production hall," they said. "When they reach this hatch, they'll blame whoever they find first. That will be you. Or her. Or the guard." The guard's face went gray. He whispered, "We need to call Elias." Cashin's eyes snapped to him. "Do it." The guard hesitated, thumb hovering over his radio. "We don't call him from here," he said, voice shaking. "Only the executive line reaches him directly." Cashin's heart pounded. "Then how?" Sable moved to the console and yanked open a small panel. Inside was a bundle of wires and a thin black handset attached to the wall, dusty as if rarely used. She grabbed it and held it to her ear. The line was dead. Sable's face tightened. She hit the cradle, tried again. Nothing. Cashin's breath caught. "They cut it." Sable's eyes darted to the camera feed. The mask maker was no longer cutting. They were doing something else, kneeling, hands working near the corridor's junction box. Sable's voice was a low growl. "They're isolating the room," she said. "No calls. No signals. No help." Cashin looked up at the hatch. The seam was wider now. A thin blade of light spilled into the room like an accusation. The mask maker's voice returned, quieter, closer. "I can open the hatch," they said. "I can leave it for the crowd. Or I can offer you a path out." Cashin's stomach clenched. "A path out?" Sable's eyes narrowed. "Don't listen." The mask maker continued as if Sable hadn't spoken. "There's a service tunnel," they said. "Old. Built when the district was still hungry for smoke. It leads to the river." Cashin felt a flicker of hope, then suspicion. "Why tell us?" The mask maker's answer was soft. "Because I want you alive," they said. "Alive people can wear masks. Dead people can only be used as symbols." Cashin stared at the file on the floor near the child, the pages of names half visible. Used as symbols. That was what Marin had said about crowds. But the mask maker spoke as if everyone was doing it, crowds, fathers, enemies. Sable took Cashin's arm, hard. "If we go through their tunnel, we go where they want," she hissed. "We become pieces on their board." Cashin pulled his arm away. "Then what do you suggest?" he snapped. "Wait here until the crowd finds us? Until my father decides whether to save us?" Sable's eyes flashed. "I suggest we control the room," she said. "We control the stock. We control the story." Cashin laughed once, bitter. "The story is burning upstairs." The mask maker's voice cut in, smooth as oil. "Doctor," they said. "You were always good at control. But control is slipping." The hatch groaned again. The wheel handle trembled, half detached. The guard raised his rifle, hands shaking. "I'll shoot through," he whispered. "I'll stop them." Sable's voice was sharp. "You'll start a war in a box." Cashin looked at the child on the floor. Their face was peaceful, unaware of the room shaking around them. Cashin felt a strange ache. This child had been the spark that lit the riot's fuse, and yet the child was only a small body with a tired heart. Cashin stepped toward the shelves. He grabbed a crate and pulled it down with a grunt. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, neatly packed, were rows of vials, each one a tiny promise. Calm printed like a prayer. He looked at Sable. "If we give them some," he said, "it could slow them." Sable's eyes hardened. "It could also turn the riot into a feeding frenzy," she replied. Cashin's voice trembled. "But keeping it locked turns them into monsters." Sable stared at him. For a heartbeat, Cashin saw something behind her hardness. Tiredness, perhaps. A person who had watched too much and decided feeling was dangerous. The mask maker spoke again, voice almost tender. "Cashin," they said. "You're learning. Your father never learned. He was born knowing how to hide." Cashin flinched at how the stranger said his name. Above them, the hatch finally gave with a violent jolt. A strip of metal snapped free and clanged to the floor. The seam widened enough that Cashin could see the mask maker's boots through the gap. Light spilled in, harsh and yellow. The mask maker's hands appeared next, gripping the edge of the hatch. Strong hands. Steady. Cashin's breath caught. The guard aimed the rifle upward, finger tightening. Sable stepped between the rifle and the opening, her body a shield. "Don't," she whispered. Cashin's mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to do something. But there was nowhere to go except the tunnel the mask maker had offered, or the door above, leading back into chaos. The mask maker leaned down into the opening. The pale, unreadable mask hovered over them like a ghost face peering into a grave. Decide, the mask maker said softly. Stay with the stock and become the sacrifice, or come with me and learn how masks are made. Cassian looked from the mask to Sable to the child on the floor. He felt the weight of the vials in the crate, the weight of the names in the file, the weight of a family crest that suddenly felt like a brand burned into skin. The guard's rifle shook. The lights buzzed. The ceiling above them thundered with distant chaos. Cassian opened his mouth to speak, and the hatch yanked wider, as if the building itself had chosen for him. Chapter 6: The Tunnel That Remembers. Air rushed down through the widened hatch, carrying the smell of smoke and sweat and something sharp, fear, hot as metal. The mask maker held the hatch open with one hand as if it weighed nothing. With the other, they dropped a coil of rope that slapped the concrete floor. Move, the mask maker said. The voice through the mask was still calm, but it carried an edge now, the edge of a door that won't stay open forever. The guard's rifle tracked the mask maker's chest. His finger trembled near the trigger. Dr. Sable stood between them, her shoulders squared, eyes fixed upward. If you're here to steal, she called, you're already too late. The crowd is upstairs. They'll strip this place to bone. The mask maker tilted their head. I'm not here for crates, they said. Crates are heavy. Stories are lighter. Cassian's mind snapped back to the child on the floor. The child lay on Sable's coat, calm, holding them in a fragile pocket of peace. Cassian knelt and scooped them up. The child's body was warm and limp, head resting against Cassian's shoulder. Cassian looked at Sable. We can't leave them. Sable's jaw tightened as if she hated that he was right. She reached for the file on the floor and slid it into her coat, movements brisk, protective. Then she glanced at the shelves of calm, the stacked crates that could soothe the city or poison it. Her fingers hovered over a crate lid, as if she might rip it open and start throwing vials like holy water. Instead, she turned away. Fine, she said, voice clipped. We go. The guard swallowed. Doctor, I can't abandon this room. Sable looked at him with something like pity. You already have, she said. You just haven't moved yet. The guard's face twisted, fear and duty fighting inside him. He looked up at the mask maker. Who are you? He demanded. Show your face. The mask maker's masked mouth curved slightly. This is my face, they said. Cassian stepped toward the rope. Where does it lead? He called upward. To the tunnel, the mask maker said. To the river. To air that doesn't taste like lies. Cassian's grip tightened on the child. He glanced at Sable. She gave him a tight nod, an agreement made of necessity, not trust. Cassian grabbed the rope and began to climb. The child's weight made it harder, his arms straining, legs shaking as his polished shoes found purchase on rough concrete. Above, the mask maker's gloved hand steadied the rope, keeping it taut. Cassian could feel the tension in it like a heartbeat. He emerged through the hatch into the service corridor above. The corridor's greenish light made everything look sickly. Smoke drifted through the air in thin threads, and somewhere beyond, the roar of the riot surged and fell like waves crashing against a cliff. Dr. Sable climbed up next, quick and efficient despite her coat and the file inside it. The guard hesitated below, then swore and followed, eyes darting as if expecting the crowd to burst through at any moment. When all three were up, the mask maker dropped the hatch and spun the wheel handle from above. The lock clicked into place. For a moment, Cassian felt the absurd thought that the vault was now safer, because the mask maker had decided it should be. The mask maker turned and began walking down the corridor without waiting to see if they followed. Cassian followed, the child cradled close. Sable walked beside him, her gaze sweeping the walls, the ceiling, every corner. The guard trailed behind, rifle up, breathing loud. They reached a junction where pipes converged and the floor sloped downward. At the end was a metal door half hidden behind a stack of old equipment, dusty and forgotten. The door had no crest, no label, no slogans. The mask maker placed a gloved hand on the door and pushed. It opened with a long groan, as if it hadn't moved in a very long time. Beyond was darkness. A damp smell rolled out, thick with earth and rust. The air was cooler, and it carried a faint whispering sound, water moving somewhere far away. The tunnel, the mask maker said, stepping inside. Cassian hesitated at the threshold. The darkness beyond felt like a mouth. But behind them, the factory's roar grew louder, and Cassian could hear sharp bangs now, doors being rammed, glass breaking, the sound of a system failing. Sable touched Cashin's elbow. We don't have time to be brave, she murmured. We just have time. Cashin stepped in. The tunnel swallowed them. The mask maker pulled the door shut behind, and the last slice of green corridor light vanished. For a moment, there was only blackness and the sound of breathing, Cashin's, the child's soft, slow breaths, the guard's ragged panting, Sable's controlled inhale. Then a small light clicked on. The mask maker held a compact lamp in one hand. Its beam was narrow and bright, cutting a thin path through the dark. The light revealed a tunnel lined with old bricks, wet with condensation. Moss clung to the cracks. Metal brackets jutted from the walls, rusted and sharp. The floor was uneven, slick with water. This place is older than the slogans, the mask maker said, voice echoing softly. Older than calm. Cashin walked carefully, shoes slipping. The child shifted in his arms, murmuring. Cashin looked down at their face. Calm made them look like they were floating somewhere far away, safe from hunger and noise. Cashin felt a twist of guilt. He had used calm as a shield in front of the crowd, and now the child carried the quiet like a borrowed cloak. Sable's footsteps were steady, though the dampness clung to her coat. She watched the mask maker's back like a predator watching another predator. How do you know about this tunnel? She asked. The mask maker didn't look back. The house has more doors than it admits, they said. Some doors are for escape. Some are for disposal. Cashin's skin prickled. Disposal. He imagined bodies, crates, secrets moved through darkness to be swallowed by water. He imagined the names in Sable's file sliding into this tunnel like stones dropped into a river. The guard's voice came from behind, strained. If you're working for Elias, I'll kill you, he said, trying to sound brave. The mask maker's shoulders rose and fell in a quiet laugh. If Elias wanted you dead, they said, you wouldn't know it was happening. Cashin's chest tightened. The mask maker's words slid into him like a thin blade. He thought again of the warning, his father might sacrifice him. It sounded absurd until it didn't. They walked deeper. The air grew colder. The walls narrowed slightly. The sound of water became clearer, a constant murmur like someone whispering to themselves. Cashin's arms began to ache from holding the child. He adjusted his grip, trying not to jostle them. The child's eyelids fluttered then settled again. Sable noticed Cashin's strain. Without asking, she stepped closer and slid her arms under the child, taking some of the weight. Cashin felt the relief in his muscles and also something else, surprise. Sable's touch was careful, almost gentle, like she remembered how to be human when she wasn't in a lab. Why would anyone build this? Cashin asked, more to fill the dark than to get an answer. The mask maker's lamp bobbed slightly as they walked. To move things that shouldn't be seen, they said. Cashin swallowed. Like calm. Like people, Sable said quietly. The mask maker paused for the first time. The lamp beam held still on the wet bricks. Yes, the mask maker said softly. Like people. They continued. Soon the tunnel opened into a wider chamber, and Cashin stopped short. The chamber was lined with old rails embedded in the floor, like tracks for carts. Along the wall were hooks, many hooks, some broken, some intact. Chains hung from a few, rusted and stiff. In the center of the chamber sat an old metal cart, its wheels locked in place by time. Cashin's throat tightened. The room felt like a memory that refused to die. The air here smelled different, more stale, like trapped breath. Sable's face went pale under the lamp's light. She stared at the hooks. This is where they brought them, she whispered, almost inaudible. Cashin looked at her. Who? Sable didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on a stain on the brick wall, dark, old, spread in a shape that looked like someone had leaned there for too long. The early subjects, she said finally. The ones who didn't fit into the posters. Cashin's stomach churned. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The chamber was too real, too physical. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a story told in the mansion to scare children into obedience. It was brick and chain and stain. The mask maker watched Sable's reaction with quiet attention. Doctor, they said, almost gently. You've been walking on this floor longer than you admit. Sable's jaw clenched. Shut up. Cashin looked from Sable to the mask maker. Did you bring us here to torment her? No, the mask maker said. I brought you here to show you what the house buried. You can't escape a thing if you don't know its shape. The guard shifted uneasily, rifle lowered now as if even holding it felt pointless in this place. We need to get out, he muttered. We need daylight. The mask maker moved past the chamber, guiding them toward another passage that sloped downward. Daylight is ahead, they said. But not the kind you expect. Cashin followed, the chamber falling behind like a nightmare left in a hallway. The passage narrowed again, the walls close enough to brush shoulders. The water sound grew louder, and the floor became slicker. Finally, the passage ended at a heavy grate. Beyond the grate, Cashin could see moving water, black, reflecting faint light from somewhere outside. The smell of the river hit him, sharp and alive. The mask maker knelt and worked at the grate lock. Their hands moved quickly, expertly. The grate creaked open. Cold air rushed in, and with it, distant city sounds, shouts, sirens, the muffled roar of the riot now far above, carried faintly through stone and water. They stepped out onto a narrow ledge beside the river. The world here was different from the district streets. This was beneath bridges, beneath warehouses, beneath the polite face of the city. The river moved with slow strength, carrying debris, wood scraps, torn paper, something that looked like fabric. The water didn't care what it carried. Cashin inhaled hard, grateful for air that wasn't factory sterile. But the relief was short-lived. On the ledge, near the tunnel exit, someone had left something. A small bundle wrapped in cloth. Cashin froze. What is that? The mask maker's lamp beam landed on it. The cloth was clean, almost white, too neat for this grim place. Sable stepped forward and crouched, her expression wary. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a single vial. Not labeled calm. Not labeled at all. But the liquid inside wasn't pale. It was darker, with a faint shimmer, like ink mixed with moonlight. Cashin's mouth went dry. That's not ours. The mask maker's voice was quiet. It's the next step, they said. Sable's eyes widened slightly, an expression Cashin hadn't seen on her before. Where did you get this? The mask maker didn't answer. Instead, they tilted their masked face toward Cashin. This is why I wanted you alive, they said. Because calm was only the first mask. Cashin stared at the shimmering vial, cold spreading through his chest. What does it do? Sable looked up at him, and for once, her voice carried something like fear. If I'm right, she whispered, it doesn't just quiet pain. Cashin's grip tightened. Then what? Sable's gaze flicked to the river, then back to the vial. It rewrites need, she said. Behind them, from within the tunnel, a new sound rose, footsteps, fast, splashing through shallow water in the dark. Not their footsteps. Someone was coming. Chapter 7, The Clinic with the Blue Door. Cashin's spine went rigid. The footsteps in the tunnel were too quick, too certain. Whoever was coming knew the path, knew the turns, knew the way the bricks sweated and the floor dipped. They weren't stumbling like a desperate stranger. They were hunting. Dr. Sable snapped the cloth closed around the shimmering vial and shoved it into her coat. Her movements were sharp, decisive, like she was sealing away a live ember. Move, she said. The mask maker's lamp swept the river ledge, searching. The ledge was narrow, hemmed in by stone and water. Up above, the underside of a bridge loomed like a ceiling. There were ladders bolted into the stone farther down, but they were slick and distant. The guard lifted his rifle again, voice strained. We're trapped. We're not, the mask maker said. They pointed downriver, where the stone wall broke into an opening framed by old timber supports. A drainage channel, half hidden by hanging weeds. Cashin could barely see it. The river's dark surface lapped at its mouth like a tongue. Sable's eyes narrowed. That leads into the district. Good, the mask maker said. The district is loud. Loud places swallow footsteps. Cashin tightened his grip on the child, who stirred slightly at the sudden movement. The child's calm was thinning at the edges, like fog lifting. Their brows pinched. A small sound escaped their throat, more uneasy than sleepy. Cashin felt panic flare. Calm wasn't a permanent blanket. It was a borrowed quiet. And borrowed things always get taken back. They hurried along the ledge, boots slipping, one hand brushing the stone wall for balance. The river smell was strong here, sharp enough to sting Cashin's nose. Above, the city's noises echoed under the bridge, distorted into something monstrous. Behind them, the tunnel footsteps hit the ledge. Cashin heard the great clang, then the scrape of boots on stone. A voice called out, not shouting, but carrying clearly through the air. Doctor! Sable's shoulders stiffened. Cashin turned his head just enough to glance back. A figure stood near the tunnel mouth, half lit by the mask maker's lamp spill. Not masked? Not hooded. A man in a dark coat, hair neat, face pale and composed as if he were walking into a quiet meeting. In his hand was not a gun. It was a small case, the kind used to carry delicate instruments. Cashin felt a chill. The man looked like he belonged in the mansion study, not under a bridge. The man lifted his chin slightly and spoke again, voice smooth. Dr. Sable. Come back. Sable's jaw tightened. Keep moving. She snapped to Cashin, but her eyes flickered toward the man with something like recognition. Cashin's heart pounded. Who is that? Sable didn't answer. The guard did, his voice shaking. That's Finch. Cashin frowned. The name meant nothing to him, and yet the way the guard said it made it sound like a storm warning. Who is Finch? Cashin demanded. The guard swallowed hard. Executive security, he whispered. He doesn't wear a uniform. He doesn't need one. Finch stepped forward, careful on the slick stone, as if he knew exactly where the algae made it treacherous. Cashin Lark, he called, and Cashin's breath caught at the sound of his own name in that calm, controlled voice. Your father asked me to find you. The mask maker didn't look back, but their shoulders tightened slightly, like a cat sensing a dog. Cashin's throat went dry. My father sent him. Sable's voice was low, bitter. Of course he did. Finch continued, voice carrying over the river. This situation is unstable, he said, choosing the word like a man choosing a knife. Come with me and we can return you to safety. Cashin almost laughed. Safety. The word felt like a joke told by someone who had never been hungry. He looked at the mask maker. Is this what you meant? He whispered. The sacrifice? The mask maker's voice came back without turning. Your father wants you retrieved, they said. Or removed. Either outcome is useful. Cashin's stomach twisted. Finch raised his hands slightly, palms open in a mirror of Cashin's earlier gesture. No one wants harm, Finch called. We want to protect you. And the doctor. And the child. Cashin's grip tightened at the mention of the child. Finch had noticed the child. Finch had said it like a detail in a report. Sable's eyes flashed. He doesn't care about the child. Finch's gaze stayed fixed on them, calm as glass. Doctor, he said. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Cashin's breath caught. He meant the shimmering vial. Sable's hand went to her coat instinctively. Finch smiled slightly, as if he'd been proven right. Thank you, he said softly. It's easier when people confirm things. The mask maker suddenly veered toward the drainage opening. In, they said. Cashin ducked into the channel, crouching. The ceiling was low, damp wood and stone. The air inside smelled of rot and river muck. Water pooled ankle-deep, cold enough to make Cashin's feet ache. Sable followed, then the guard. The mask maker was last, stepping in backward, lamp held up, eyes on Finch. Finch approached the channel mouth, stopping just outside. He didn't rush. He didn't threaten. He simply watched, as if patience was one of his tools. Mask maker, Finch said, voice almost bored. You're making this messy. The mask maker tilted their masked face. Mess is honest, they replied. Finch's eyes narrowed. You can't hide forever. The mask maker's voice was soft. I'm not hiding, they said. I'm teaching. Finch's gaze slid to Cashin. Mr. Lark, he said. Your father is worried. Cashin felt rage flare. Is he? He snapped. Or is he protecting himself? Finch's expression didn't change. Those are the same thing, he said. The words hit Cashin like a slap. Finch said it as if it were obvious, as if Cashin were naive for thinking otherwise. Sable hissed under her breath. Now you hear it in plain speech. Finch reached into his coat and pulled out something small and cylindrical. Not a gun. A canister. Cashin's heart lurched. What is that? Finch's voice stayed mild. A dispersal, he said. A gentle one. It will make this easier. For everyone. Sable's eyes widened. No. Finch tossed the canister into the channel. It clattered on stone and rolled toward them, hissing. A sweet smell bloomed instantly, warm and inviting, like flowers crushed in a fist. Cashin's mind flashed, calm. Not in a vial. In the air. Cashin's breath caught. The anonymous warning flared in his mind, don't trust the calm in your own veins. His body reacted before his thoughts. His muscles loosened. His anger softened. The fear dulled at the edges. The world seemed less sharp, less urgent. It felt good. It felt like sinking into a bath after cold rain. Sable slapped a hand over her mouth and nose, eyes blazing. Don't breathe, she barked, muffled by her palm. Cashin tried to hold his breath, but the sweetness was everywhere, crawling into his lungs through tiny gaps, through the desperate need to inhale. The child in Cashin's arms stirred violently, eyes snapping open. Their face twisted in confusion and need, as if their body recognized the smell and demanded it. The guard coughed once, then his shoulders sagged. His rifle dipped. His eyes went glassy. The mask maker grabbed the canister with a gloved hand and hurled it back toward the channel mouth. It skidded out into the open air near Finch, still hissing. Finch stepped back calmly, as if he'd expected it. He didn't cover his face. He inhaled without fear. Cashin's stomach tightened. Finch didn't react like a normal person. Either he was trained, or he was already protected somehow. Sable grabbed Cashin's collar and yanked him deeper into the channel, away from the open mouth where the gas was thickest. "Move!" she snarled. "If you pass out here, you'll wake up in your father's hands." Cashin stumbled forward, legs heavy, mind swimming. The sweetness made the tunnel seem less disgusting, almost bearable. That was the danger. Calm didn't just quiet pain. It made bad places feel acceptable. They pushed through the channel until it opened into a side street of the district. They emerged behind a row of buildings, coughing, blinking hard. The air outside was still smoky, still foul, but at least it didn't smell like honeyed surrender. Cashin leaned against the wall, chest heaving. The child clung to him now, awake, eyes wide and frantic. "I feel," the child whispered. "I feel empty." Cashin's throat tightened. The calm mist from earlier was fading, and the child's body was remembering the hunger. Sable crouched in front of the child, her face tight. "Listen," she said softly, voice gentler now. "Breathe. Slow. I know it hurts." The child shook their head violently. "I need it," they whimpered. "I need it now." Cashin stared, helpless. The child's need was like a storm behind their eyes. The mask maker scanned the street. The district here was cramped, cluttered with stacked crates, hanging laundry, and narrow alleys. People ran past in the distance, shouting. Sirens wailed somewhere far off, then cut out again. "We need cover," the mask maker said. "Somewhere without cameras." Sable's eyes darted. "A clinic," she said suddenly. "There's one nearby. The blue door." Cashin looked at her. "You know it?" Sable's mouth tightened. "I've been there," she said. "When they called and begged for more." They hurried through alleys until they reached a small building tucked between a closed shop and a boarded-up apartment. The door was painted blue, chipped and faded. Above it hung a crooked sign with a symbol of an open hand. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and old paper. The waiting room was crowded with people sitting too close together, faces drawn tight with pain and anger. A few looked up as Cashin entered, their eyes sharpening at the sight of his clean clothes, his posture. A woman behind a counter froze when she saw Sable. Relief flashed across her face, then fear. "Doctor," she whispered. "We have nothing. They're coming. They're saying the larks are hiding it." Sable's voice was clipped. "Lock the door." The woman hesitated. "But—" "Lock it," Sable repeated, and the woman obeyed, hands shaking as she slid the bolt. Cashin stood in the middle of the crowded room, holding the child who was now trembling, breathing fast. People stared at him, some with suspicion, some with hope, some with hatred. A man in the corner stood up slowly, eyes fixed on Cashin. His voice was hoarse. "You're one of them," he said. Cashin's mouth went dry. "I'm—" The man stepped closer, and Cashin saw the tremor in his hands, the sweat on his brow, the way his pupils seemed too wide. "Do you have it?" the man whispered. "Do you have calm?" The room seemed to lean forward, every ear straining. Cashin felt the weight of their attention like a net tightening. Sable moved between Cashin and the man. "No," she said firmly. "And if you lunge at him, you'll scare the child to death." The man's face contorted. "Then why are you here?" Sable's eyes flicked to the back rooms, then to Cashin. "Because if we don't stop what's coming," she said, "this clinic becomes a slaughterhouse." Cashin's heart hammered. "What's coming?" The woman behind the counter answered, voice trembling. "They're going door to door," she whispered. "People with bats. People with knives. They're looking for anyone who works for the larks. Anyone who might have calm." Cashin felt cold spread through him. He imagined the crowd turning into hunters, not just desperate but organized, sharpened by need. He imagined Finch's calm voice. Those are the same thing. The mask maker moved to the window and peeked through a crack in the blinds. Their lamp was off now, mask blending into the dim clinic light. "They're not just looking," the mask maker murmured. "They're being guided." Sable's eyes snapped to them. "By Finch." The mask maker tilted their head. By someone who benefits from the city tearing itself apart, they said. Finch is a hand, not the mind. Cashin swallowed. Then whose mind is it? Sable didn't answer. She pulled the shimmering vial from her coat, holding it low so only Cashin and the mask maker could see. The liquid inside seemed to move on its own, slow and glossy, like a living shadow. The mask maker's voice softened. That's the new mask, they said. Cashin's throat tightened. You said it rewrites need. Sable's eyes were haunted. If it does what I think, she whispered, it won't just make people want calm. It will make them want whatever you choose to attach it to. Cashin's stomach turned. You mean, we could make them want obedience? Sable's gaze snapped to his. Or we could make them want revenge, she said. At that moment, a loud crash came from outside, the sound of something heavy hitting wood. The clinic door shuddered. Someone shouted from the street. Open up! We know you're in there! The waiting room erupted in panic. People scrambled, knocking chairs, crying out. The child in Cashin's arms began to sob, clawing at his shirt. It hurts, they gasped. Make it stop. Cashin's hands tightened around the child, helpless. Sable looked from the trembling child to the shuddering door to the shimmering vial in her hand. Her expression hardened into a choice. And outside, the door buckled again, the bolt straining, as the hunter slammed into it with rising fury. Chapter 8: The Vial That Chooses a Throat. The blue door bent inward with each, wood fibers crying as they tore. The bolt held, but it was a thin promise against a hungry crowd. Inside, the clinic's air turned thick with panic. People pressed toward the back rooms, toward corners, toward anywhere that felt less exposed. A woman clutched her arm as if holding herself together. An old man rocked in his chair, whispering prayers that sounded like bargaining. A teenager stood too still, eyes flat, as if fear had already emptied them out. Cashin held the child tighter. The child's sobs were fast and sharp, their small body trembling like a bird in a storm. Dr. Sable stood near the counter with the shimmering vial in her hand, her fingers wrapped around it so tightly her knuckles were pale. The vial caught the clinic's weak light and returned it as a dark glint. It didn't look like medicine. It looked like a secret pressed into glass. The mask maker watched her, mask angled slightly, as if listening to the tension in her breathing. The woman behind the counter whispered, Doctor, what is that? Sable didn't answer. Outside, someone screamed, Burn it down! A roar answered, and Cashin heard the scrape of something dragged along the pavement. Metal. A barrel. A can. Something that could hold fuel. Cashin's voice cracked. We have to leave. Sable's eyes flicked to him. Through what? She snapped. Walls? The mask maker's head turned toward the back of the clinic. There's a passage, they said. Old buildings here connect. Like veins. You just need to know where to cut. The woman behind the counter blinked. There's no. There is, Sable interrupted, and her voice carried a strange bitterness, like she hated herself for knowing. She pointed toward a door marked staff only. Back room, she said. There's an access panel behind the shelves. It was used for deliveries before the street got difficult. The woman stared. Why would you? Sable didn't let her finish. Because I've been here when the city was starving and the house was silent, she said. Because you learn exits when you stop believing help will come. Another hit the door. The bolt groaned. Cashin looked down at the child. Their eyes were squeezed shut, tears streaking their dirty cheeks. It hurts, they whispered again, voice cracking. I'm empty. I'm empty. Cashin's chest tightened. Sable, he whispered. Please. Sable's gaze dropped to the child. For a heartbeat, the hardness in her face softened into something like grief. Then it snapped back, sharp and controlled. She stepped closer, holding the shimmering vial low, hidden by her body from the room's eyes. Cashin's breath caught. What are you doing? Sable's voice was barely a whisper. If this vial does what I think, she said, it can turn a riot into a choir. Cashin stared at her. Or a massacre. Sable's eyes flicked to the door, to the crowd outside, to the people inside who were already one scream away from trampling each other. The massacre is already scheduled, she whispered. We're just deciding who writes the invitation. The mask maker's voice came softly. Doctor, they said. Don't make yourself the author. You'll hate the ending. Sable ignored them. She crouched in front of the child, and her posture changed, less like a scientist, more like a weary healer. Look at me, she said gently. The child's eyes opened, glassy with pain and need. Their gaze locked onto the vial as if it were a star. "What is that?" the child whispered. Sable hesitated. Her thumb brushed the vial stopper. Cashin saw the tiniest tremor in her hand again, that same crack in her armor. "It's quiet," Sable said, choosing the word as if it might cut her tongue. "Not like calm. Different." The child licked their lips unconsciously. "Give it," they begged. "Please." Cashin's stomach twisted. "Sable," he said, voice hoarse. "They're a child." Sable's eyes flicked to Cashin, and in them he saw something Cashin had never expected from her: fear of being judged. Fear of being seen clearly. "This city makes children into experiments every day," she whispered. "At least this one has a name in our hands." Cashin recoiled. "That's not." A new sound cut through them. A crackle. A sudden, sharp smell. Smoke. Someone outside was lighting something. The clinic door shuttered again, and this time the wood split near the lock, a jagged line opening like a mouth. Sable's decision snapped into place. She lifted the vial toward the child's lips. Cashin reached out instinctively to stop her, then froze. Because he saw the child's face. The child wasn't just pleading. They were already falling. Their body was fighting itself, nerve screaming, skin too tight on bone. They were becoming the thing Cashin had seen in the holding room. The beginning of the hunger, not the end. Cashin's hand fell. Sable pressed the vial's rim to the child's mouth and tilted it. The child drank. It was only a small swallow, no more than a taste. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the child's whole body went still. Not relaxed. Not soothed. Still, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Cashin's breath caught in his throat. "What did you do?" The child's eyes opened slowly. Their pupils seemed darker, wider, as if the room's light had been swallowed. Their breathing became deep and even, too even. Sable watched the child's face with intense focus, searching for signs: tremor, sweat, panic. There were none. The child looked around the room. And smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was too calm, too deliberate. It made Cashin's skin crawl. The child turned their head toward the blue door as it buckled again. Someone outside screamed, "Break it!" The child's smile widened slightly. Then, in a voice that was still small but oddly clear, the child said, "Open it!" Cashin stared. "What?" The child repeated, louder, as if giving an instruction to a machine. "Open it!" Sable's lips parted. She looked shocked, then alarmed. "No," she whispered. "No, you shouldn't." But the child wriggled out of Cashin's arms with sudden strength, landing on their feet lightly. They walked toward the door. People in the waiting room froze, watching. The child moved like they were guided by a wire pulled tight. Cashin surged forward. "Stop!" The child didn't stop. Sable grabbed Cashin's sleeve hard. "Let them!" she hissed. Cashin turned on her, furious. "Are you insane?" Sable's eyes were wide, fixed on the child. "I need to see," she whispered. "I need to know what it does." Cashin's blood went cold. So it was true. Even now, even with fire outside, Sable was still a scientist first. The child reached the door. The bolt was bent, the wood cracked, smoke beginning to seep through the edges. The child's small hand touched the bolt. The crowd outside shouted again, and the door shuddered. The child slid the bolt. Cashin's heart dropped through the floor. The blue door swung open. The crowd spilled forward, faces twisted, eyes bright with frenzy. The first few nearly tripped over the threshold in their urgency. Then they saw the child standing there. They froze. Not because they cared about the child. Not because innocence stopped them. They froze because something in the air shifted. The child lifted their chin slightly and looked at them, eyes dark and steady. The child's voice cut through the crowd's noise like a bell. "Stop," the child said. The word wasn't loud. It wasn't shouted. But it landed. The nearest man, gripping a bat, blinked as if waking. His arms lowered slightly. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes flicked around, confused. "What?" he began. "Stop," the child said again. The crowd's front line hesitated. The chant that had driven them here faltered, breaking into murmurs. Cashin stood behind the child, breath trapped in his chest. Sable stepped closer, eyes sharp, almost hungry with attention. The mask maker remained back near the window, their mask turned toward the scene, still as a statue. Outside, Finch appeared at the edge of the crowd, moving calmly through the bodies as if they parted for him. He stopped a few steps away, his pale face impassive. His gaze fixed on the child. Then it slid to Cashin, then to Sable. Finch's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Recognition. "Doctor," Finch said, voice smooth. "You found it." Sable's shoulders stiffened. Finch took a slow step forward. The crowd did not surge this time. They held, as if waiting for instruction. Cashin's stomach churned. The child's words had not just stopped them. It had paused them. Like a hand on the back of a neck. Finch's eyes stayed on the child. "Impressive," he murmured. "They listen." Sable's voice was tight. "What is it?" Finch's gaze flicked to her. "You know what it is," he said. "You made the door. This is the key." Cashin's breath caught. "You wanted this," he whispered, understanding dawning. "The riot. The hunger. You wanted the city desperate so this would work." Finch's expression didn't change. "Desperation is the cleanest solvent," he said. "It dissolves doubt." The child stood between them, small body steady, eyes dark. The crowd waited behind Finch, quiet now, listening. Cashin felt a cold terror. The child had become a switch. And Finch had just shown he knew how to flip it. Finch looked at Cashin again, voice gentle as a lullaby. "Come home," he said. "Your father will be relieved." Cashin's mouth went dry. Home. The mansion with no curtains. The study with the jewel vial. The portraits watching. He looked down at the child. The child's small hand twitched, and Cashin realized the child was not fully there. The smile was still on their face, frozen like a painted expression. Sable whispered, almost to herself. "It chose a throat." The mask maker's voice came from the back of the clinic, soft but sharp. "And now it will choose a master." Finch took another step closer, and the crowd's bodies shifted with him as if he were pulling them on invisible strings. Cashin felt Sable's hand tighten on his sleeve, her nails biting through cloth. Finch's eyes glittered. "Give me the doctor," he said softly, and the crowd behind him inhaled as one, ready to obey. The child's lips parted. And Cashin couldn't tell whose command was about to come out. Chapter 9. The House Learns to Whisper. The air in the clinic turned thin, as if all the oxygen had been stolen by a single sentence. "Give me the doctor." Finch didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He spoke the way Elias spoke in the study, soft, patient, certain the room would bend. Behind him, the crowd shifted, a ripple of bodies readying to become hands. Faces that moments ago had been burning with rage now looked emptied, waiting for a new shape to fill them. Cashin's throat tightened. He glanced at the child, standing in the doorway like a tiny gatekeeper. The child's eyes were dark and calm, their smile faint and wrong, as if the expression belonged to someone else. Dr. Sable's fingers dug into Cashin's sleeve. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp, no panic, only calculation. She leaned close to Cashin's ear. "If he takes me," she whispered, "he takes the key." Cashin swallowed. "The key is the child." Sable's breath was cold against Cashin's skin. "The child is the lock," she whispered. "The key is the vial. And I'm the only one who can tell if the key can be broken." Cashin's pulse hammered. Finch had called it a key. Finch had known. That meant Elias might know too. Or might know enough to want it in his hands. Cashin looked at Finch again. Finch's eyes flicked over Cashin's face with the calm interest of a man reading a document. "Cashin," Finch said gently, as if they were alone. "This doesn't have to be ugly." The mask maker's voice floated from the back of the clinic. "It always is," they said. Finch's gaze slid toward the mask maker. "You," he said. "You've made yourself a nuisance." The mask maker tilted their head. "A nuisance is just a truth that won't sit down," they replied. Finch ignored the remark. He focused on the child again. "Tell them," he said softly. Cashin felt sick. Finch wasn't asking the crowd. He was asking the child. The child's lips moved. Cashin stepped forward fast, putting himself between Finch and the child. "No," Cashin said, voice rough. "Stop." The child's eyes flicked to Cashin, not with recognition but with a kind of mild curiosity, like a machine reacting to a new object in its path. Cashin lowered his voice, desperate. "You're safe," he told the child. "You're okay. You don't need to." The child's smile widened a fraction. "Stop," the child said, but the word landed wrong this time. It wasn't a command to the crowd. It was aimed at Cashin, and Cashin felt a strange heaviness in his limbs, a softness creeping into his muscles. Not the sweetness of calm gas. Something deeper, darker. A tug on the inside of his will. Cashin's knees wavered. Sable cursed softly and shoved Cashin backward, breaking whatever invisible thread had snagged him. Cashin stumbled, catching himself on the counter. Sable stepped forward, shoulders squared, facing Finch. "This is what you want," she said sharply. "A child turned into a lever?" Finch's expression remained smooth. "A lever is useful," he said. "And usefulness is the only morality the city respects." Sable's voice was venom. "You sound like Elias." Finch's eyes flickered. "I learned from the best," he said. Cashin's mouth went dry. Finch had said it without shame. Sable lifted her chin. "If you take me," she said, "you won't get what you want. You'll get a dead end." Finch tilted his head slightly. "You underestimate how many dead ends we can afford," he said. Cashin felt his stomach twist. Dead ends. Disposable paths. People whose names ended up in files. Finch's gaze sharpened. "Take her," he said, still soft. The crowd's front line moved. Hands reached forward, not wild now, but coordinated, as if the bodies shared one instruction. Cashin's mind screamed. He looked around for an exit, for anything. The back room passage. The windows. But there were too many bodies. The mask maker moved. In a blur, they crossed the waiting room, grabbed a metal tray from the counter, one meant for instruments, and hurled it toward the doorway. The tray spun, flashing in the light, and slammed into the floor near Finch with a loud metallic crash. The sound startled the crowd, not enough to break their obedience, but enough to interrupt their rhythm. A few people flinched, blinking as if waking from a fog. The mask maker used that heartbeat of hesitation. They surged forward and grabbed the child, not roughly, but firmly, lifting them up and pulling them backward into the clinic. The crowd hissed, anger flickering back like embers catching air. Finch's eyes narrowed. "Put them down," he said, voice still gentle but now edged with steel. The mask maker held the child against their chest, the pale mask close to the child's dark eyes. "No," they said simply. The child's mouth opened. "Stop," the child said again, voice clear. The mask maker's shoulders sagged slightly, as if they'd been struck from inside. Their grip loosened a fraction. Cashin's breath caught. The child's command was affecting the mask maker too. Sable's eyes widened. "It's not choosing," she whispered. "It's spreading." Finch took another step forward, and the crowd moved with him, a tide guided by a calm man's hand. Cashin's mind raced. If the child could tug at anyone's will, then no one was safe, not even the mask maker. Sable turned sharply to Cashin, voice urgent. "We need to break the link," she hissed. "The child needs an anchor. A person they trust." Cashin stared at her. "They don't trust anyone right now." Sable's eyes flashed. "Then make them," she snapped. "Talk to them. Touch their face. Say their name." Cashin's throat tightened. He didn't know the child's name. The woman behind the counter cried. "Their name is Leo." Cashin's heart jolted. "Leo," he said, stepping toward the mask maker and the child. He forced his voice to soften, to become steady. "Leo, look at me." The child's dark eyes flicked toward Cashin. For a moment, something in them shifted, confusion, a flicker of real presence. Cashin reached out slowly and touched the child's cheek. The skin was warm, alive. Not a tool. Not a lock. A child. "Leo," Cashin whispered. "You're scared. But you're here with us. You're not alone." The child's smile trembled. Their lips parted. Finch's voice cut in, smooth. "Leo," he called. "Come." The child's gaze darted toward Finch, drawn like iron to a magnet. Cashin's heart pounded. He felt the pull too, not in his mind, but in the room, as if Finch's voice carried a frequency the vial had tuned the child to hear. Sable grabbed Cashin's shoulder. "He's trained," she whispered. "He knows how to speak to the altered brain." Cashin swallowed. "Then how do we stop him?" Sable's eyes flicked to the shimmering vial still hidden in her coat. Her voice dropped. "By making the house afraid," she said. Cashin stared. "What do you mean?" Sable's gaze went hard. "Finch won't retreat for kindness," she whispered. "He'll retreat for risk. He'll retreat if he thinks the story will turn on him." Cashin looked around. Cameras. Always cameras. Even here, a small one in the corner of the clinic ceiling, blinking red. The city was a room with no curtains. Elias had said it like a warning. Now Cashin understood it like a weapon. The mask maker's voice was strained, as if fighting the child's pull. There's a broadcast node 2 blocks away, they rasped. Old neighborhood relay. If we get a signal out, we can show the district what Finch is doing. What the house is doing. Finch heard the words. His gaze sharpened. No one is broadcasting anything, he said, and the crowd surged again. Sable's hand darted into her coat. She pulled out the shimmering vial and held it up where Finch could see it. The liquid caught the light and seemed to swallow it. For the first time, Finch's expression changed. Not fear, but focus. Hungry focus. Doctor, Finch said softly. That belongs to the house. Sable's lips curled. Does it? She snapped. Or does it belong to the city you've been starving? Finch's gaze flicked to the camera in the ceiling, then back to the vial. Cashin saw it, the calculation. Risk. Story. Control. Sable lifted the vial higher, her voice rising so the waiting room could hear. This, she said loudly, is what they were hiding. This is what they were testing. This is why the clinics are empty. Because they wanted desperation. People in the waiting room gasped. Murmurs erupted. The fog in their faces cracked, anger flickering back. Finch's voice snapped, sharp now. Quiet. But it was too late. Sable had changed the room's mood. She had given them a new villain with a name and a face. Finch stepped forward, faster now, hand reaching for Sable. Cashin lunged between them. Finch's hand grabbed Cashin's collar, yanking him close. Finch's eyes were cold and precise. You're making this worse, Finch whispered. Your father will not forgive you. Cashin's breath came hot. Then he can stop pretending. Cashin spat back. Finch's grip tightened, and Cashin felt the pressure like a leash. Then the mask maker slammed the metal tray into Finch's wrist. Finch hissed, releasing Cashin. In the same motion, the mask maker grabbed Sable's arm and pulled her backward toward the staff door. No, the mask maker said. Cashin scooped Leo into his arms, careful, urgent. Leo's eyes fluttered, the strange calm still clinging, but Cashin could feel the child's body trembling underneath, like a small animal under a spell. They shoved through the staff door into the back room. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with empty bandage rolls and half-used bottles. Sable rushed to a panel behind the shelves and yanked it open, revealing a narrow crawl space. The passage smelled of dust and old wood. Go, Sable said. Cashin climbed in first, pulling Leo with him. The mask maker followed, then Sable. The guard hesitated, eyes wide, then scrambled in as well, rifle scraping the wood. Behind them, the clinic erupted again, shouts, crashing furniture, Finch's voice cutting through it all like a blade. As Cashin crawled through the narrow passage, Leo's small hand clutched his shirt. Where are we going? Leo whispered, voice thin. Cashin swallowed hard. He didn't know. He only knew one thing: every path now led back to the house, whether they wanted it or not. The passage ended at a trapdoor. The mask maker pushed it open, and cold night air rushed in. They emerged into an alley behind another building. Above, the sky was stained by smoke, the city's lights blurred like bruises. In the distance, sirens wailed again, closer, then farther, as if the city itself didn't know where to run. Sable grabbed Cashin's sleeve and pointed upward, toward the hill where the mansion sat unseen but present, like a thought you can't stop thinking. The house is going to speak, she whispered. Elias will whisper into every ear he owns. Cashin's heart hammered. And what do we do? The mask maker's voice was low. We make him shout, they said. Then, from the alley entrance, a shadow moved. Finch stepped into view, calm as ever, coat unruffled, eyes fixed on them. He wasn't alone. Behind him, the crowd flowed in, quiet now, watching, waiting. Finch lifted a small device in his hand, thumb resting on a button, and smiled slightly. No, he said softly. We stop running. And Leo, in Cashin's arms, turned their head toward Finch as if hearing a familiar call. Chapter 10: The River of Voices. Cashin felt Leo's small body shift in his arms, not in fear, but in attention. The child's head turned toward Finch the way a flower turns toward light. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. The vial's shadow still lived in Leo's blood, listening for the right sound. Finch stood in the alley mouth like a doorway made of flesh. Behind him, the crowd filled the narrow space, faces lit by street lamps and reflected firelight. They weren't chanting now. They weren't screaming. They were waiting. Cashin's throat tightened. A screaming crowd could be reasoned with, maybe. A waiting crowd was something else. A waiting crowd was a tool. Finch lifted the small device in his hand. It looked like a simple remote, smooth, black, with one button that caught the light like an eye. Sable's fingers tightened around her coat where the shimmering vial was hidden. The mask maker stepped slightly in front of Cashin, as if offering their masked body as the first wall. The guard raised his rifle, but his arms shook. "Back off," he barked, voice cracking. Finch didn't move. "If you shoot," he said softly, "you'll start a story you can't finish." Cashin's mind flashed to the camera in the clinic, the idea of broadcasting. Stories. Always stories. Finch's gaze slid to Cashin. "Mr. Lark," he said, calm as a lullaby, "give me the child." Cashin's jaw clenched. "No." Finch's eyes remained steady. "You don't understand what you're holding," he said. "That child is a spark. Sparks don't get held. They get contained." Sable's voice was sharp. "Contained like the people in the room beneath the floor?" For the first time, Finch's gaze flickered toward Sable with something like annoyance. "Doctor," he said, "you're tired. Come with me and you can rest. We'll fix this properly." Sable's lips curled. "You mean you'll bury it properly?" Finch's expression smoothed again. "The city is burning," he said. "Burying is sometimes the only way to stop the spread." The mask maker's voice came low and precise. "He's buying time," they murmured. "He wants Leo to listen." Cashin looked down at Leo. The child's eyes were too wide, too dark. Their breathing was slow, controlled. Not a child's rhythm. Cashin's chest tightened with dread and guilt. "Leo," Cashin whispered, trying to soften his voice into an anchor. "Look at me." Leo blinked, slowly. Their gaze flicked to Cashin for a heartbeat, then drifted back to Finch as if pulled by a thread. Finch took one step closer. The crowd shifted with him, bodies moving like a single organism. Cashin felt the alley tighten, the air thickening. A woman near the front held a broken piece of wood, but her face was blank, as if she didn't know she was holding a weapon. Finch lifted his hand slightly, palm out, as if greeting Leo. "Come," he said again, very softly. Leo's lips parted. Cashin felt panic flare. He turned to Sable. "Can you reverse it?" he hissed. Sable's face was tight, eyes darting. "Not here," she whispered. "Not like this. I don't even know what reverse means yet." Cashin's stomach turned. He looked at the mask maker. "You said a broadcast node? Where?" The mask maker's masked face tilted toward the river end of the alley. 2 blocks, they said. "Past the old laundry. But Finch will follow." Finch heard the word broadcast and smiled faintly, as if amused. "You still think you can outrun the house?" he said. "The house has roots everywhere." Sable's voice rose, cutting through the alley's tension. "Then let's pull one," she snapped. She yanked the shimmering vial from her coat and held it up in full view, letting the street lamp catch it. The liquid inside shimmered like a bruise. The crowd's faces shifted, fear, fascination, hunger. A murmur ran through them. Finch's gaze sharpened. The calm mask slipped just enough for Cashin to see the desire underneath. Not for the vial's effect, perhaps, but for what it represented, control. "Put it down," Finch said softly. Sable's eyes glittered. "Make me," she said. Finch's thumb hovered over the button on his device. The mask maker's voice was urgent. "He's about to trigger something." Cashin's pulse spiked. "Trigger what?" Finch pressed the button. A sound burst from somewhere above, small speakers hidden in the alley's mouth, in the walls, in the street lamp casing. A low tone at first, barely audible, then rising into a pattern that made Cashin's teeth ache. It wasn't music. It wasn't speech. It was a signal. Leo jerked in Cashin's arms as if tugged by a hook. The child's pupils widened further. Their face went blank, the smile disappearing into a smooth, obedient stillness. Then Leo spoke in a voice that sounded like their own but carried a strange steadiness. "Give," Leo said. The crowd moved. Hands shot forward toward Sable and the vial. The alley erupted into motion, but not chaotic motion, directed motion, as if Finch's signal had tuned the crowd into a single frequency. Cashin lunged, instinctively shielding Sable, but bodies pressed in from all sides. Someone's elbow slammed into Cashin's ribs. The child slipped lower in his grip, and Cashin tightened his arms, desperate not to drop them. Sable shoved the vial into Cashin's hand. "Run!" she snapped. Cashin stared at it, dark shimmer in glass, the weight of a weapon disguised as help. "No," Cashin said, voice hoarse. "You take." Sable grabbed Cashin's face with one hand, fierce and sudden, and forced him to look at her. Listen, she hissed. If Finch gets this, it's not just the district. It's the whole city. It's everyone. Cashin's throat tightened. He clutched the vial and Leo at once, feeling absurdly overloaded. Child poison, hope, doom. The mask maker grabbed Cashin's shoulder and yanked him sideways into a narrow gap between buildings, a slit of darkness where the crowd's bodies couldn't easily follow. Move! The mask maker barked. Cashin stumbled into the gap, scraping his shoulder on brick. The guard followed, shoving away grasping hands with the rifle's stock. Sable came last, ducking under a swinging arm, her face set. Finch didn't chase immediately. He stood at the alley mouth, watching, his expression unreadable. Then he raised the device again and pressed the button a second time. The signal changed, deeper, pulsing. The crowd turned their heads in unison toward the gap where Cashin had fled. Cashin felt ice in his veins. They weren't searching. They were being aimed. The mask maker led them through the tight passage until it opened onto a wider street near the riverfront. The district here was lined with old warehouses, their walls painted with faded murals. The river ran alongside, black and steady. Ahead, the old laundry building stood like a sagging giant, windows boarded, signs peeling. Above its door was a metal pole with a small box attached, the relay node, a forgotten heart of communication. That's it, the mask maker said, pointing. Sable's voice was tight. If we can feed it a signal, we can broadcast, she said. We can show Finch controlling them. Cashin's mouth went dry. Show who? Sable's eyes flashed. Anyone, she said. The council. The city. People who still have enough sense to be horrified. They sprinted toward the laundry. The building's door was chained, but the mask maker produced a small tool and snapped the lock with practiced ease. Inside, the air smelled of old soap and mold. Rows of rusted machines sat like dead beasts. The floor was littered with broken glass. They moved to the back where the relay box's wiring ran into the building. Sable yanked open a panel, exposing tangled wires and a small interface plate, dusty and old but intact. I can patch into it, she muttered, fingers moving fast. Give me a minute. Cashin stood guard, clutching Leo and the vial. Leo's eyes were half-lidded now, expression smooth, almost absent. The signal from Finch was still in the air somewhere, like a scent. Cashin could feel the child's attention drifting outward, listening. Leo, Cashin whispered again, softer. Stay with me. Leo blinked slowly. Give, Leo murmured. Cashin's stomach twisted. The guard peered through a cracked window. They're coming, he whispered. Cashin looked out. Down the street, the crowd flowed like a dark river, moving steadily toward the laundry. Finch walked at the front, unhurried, his coat swinging slightly with each step. The crowd's faces were blank, but their hands were ready. Cashin's pulse hammered. Sable! Sable didn't look up. Almost, she snapped, fingers working. The mask maker moved to another window, watching. He's not just steering them, they said quietly. He's testing the range. Cashin's throat tightened. Range? The mask maker's masked face turned toward Cashin. He wants to know how far a voice can travel once the city is tuned, they said. How many mouths he can borrow. Sable hissed. Got it. A small light on the interface plate flickered to life. Sable's eyes were bright. We can broadcast, she said. But we need a message. Clear. Short. Something that cuts through. Cashin's mind raced. He thought of Elias, of Finch, of the holding room, of the vault, of the child's altered smile. He thought of the city as a room with no curtains. What do we say? Cashin asked, voice shaking. Sable looked up at him, face hard. We say the house is lying, she said. We say calm was never mercy. It was leverage. The mask maker's voice came low. And we show them the new mask, they said, nodding at the vial in Cashin's hand. Cashin stared at the vial. The shimmer inside seemed to deepen, as if it liked being seen. Outside, the crowd reached the laundry's door. They didn't scream. They simply began to push. The door shuddered, chains rattling. Finch's voice floated through the cracked window, gentle as ever. Cashin, he called. You can still come home. Cashin's breath came fast. He looked at Sable. If we broadcast, he'll come for us harder. Sable's eyes were fierce. If we don't, she said, he'll come for everyone. The door buckled. The chains groaned. The relay box hummed softly, awake after years of silence, waiting to carry a story into the city's ears. And in Cashin's arms, Leo lifted their head and whispered, almost lovingly, as if repeating a lullaby Finch had taught them. Give. Chapter 11, The Portrait That Blinks. The laundry door bowed inward, chains stretched tight like tendons. The wood moaned with each shove from the outside. The sound wasn't anger now. It was inevitability. Like a tide pressing against a door, and knowing the door will get tired first. Inside, the relay box's little light flickered steadily, an eye opening in the dust. Dr. Sable stood over the exposed wires, hair slightly loose now, the first sign of disorder Cashin had ever seen on her. Her hands were steady anyway. Her mind seemed to run on rails even as the world shook. The mask maker hovered near the window, head tilted, listening not just to footsteps but to silence, the kind of silence a crowd makes when it's being held by an unseen hand. The guard aimed his rifle at the door. His breathing came in sharp pulls. He looked less like a protector now and more like a man who had realized protection was a costume. Cashin held Leo close with one arm and the shimmering vial with the other hand, fingers cramped. The glass was cold. The liquid inside seemed to thicken when Cashin stared at it, as if it enjoyed being feared. No, Sable said, voice tight. If we're going to speak, we speak now. Cashin swallowed. His mouth felt full of sand. What exactly do we say? Sable's eyes burned. We tell the truth, she said like it was a simple act. The mask maker's voice came low. Truth isn't a message, they said. It's a weapon. You have to aim it. Cashin's mind flashed through images. The holding room. The straps. The child's altered smile. Finch's remote. Elias's hand covering the vial in the study. The shelves of calm under the factory floor. He realized the truth wasn't one thing. It was a swarm. We need something they can hold, Cashin said, voice hoarse. Something that makes them see. Sable nodded once. Show them Finch's signal, she said. Show them the new vial. Let them understand they're being played. The guard barked. Door is going. The chain snapped with a sharp metallic scream. The door slammed inward, half breaking free, and bodies poured into the laundry like water through a cracked dam. Finch stepped in last, as if arriving after the storm. He didn't rush. He didn't shove. He simply walked, eyes scanning, and the crowd parted around him like a curtain. Cashin's stomach clenched. The house's man didn't have to fight. The city fought for him. Finch's gaze landed on Cashin and softened in a practiced way. There you are, he said gently. You're exhausted. Cashin wanted to spit at him, but his throat wouldn't cooperate. The air felt heavy, charged with the signal Finch had released, a hum that made Cashin's skin itch. Sable stepped forward, blocking Finch's path to Cashin. Don't come closer, she said. Finch looked at her as if she were a stubborn machine. Doctor, he said. You're brilliant. You're also reckless. Hand over the vial. Sable's lips curled. No. Finch's eyes flicked to the relay box, the open wires, the glowing light. Something shifted in his expression, annoyance sharpening into urgency. Ah, Finch said softly. You found a mouth. Sable's hand hovered over the relay interface. Back up, she said. Or I broadcast. Finch didn't back up. Instead, he raised his device and pressed the button again. The hum deepened, pulsing through the room. Cashin felt it in his teeth, in his bones. The crowd's faces smoothed further, expressions flattening into readiness. Leo's body tensed in Cashin's arms. The child's eyes unfocused, lips parting. Cashin's heart pounded. Leo, he whispered, desperate. Stay with me. Leo turned their heads slowly toward Finch. Their mouths shaped the word again, soft as breath. Give. The crowd echoed it, not as a chant but as a response. Give. Sable's face went pale. He's using the child as a transmitter, she whispered, horrified. The mask maker moved suddenly, scooping a handful of broken glass from the floor and flinging it toward Finch's device. The glass pinged off Finch's coat and clattered harmlessly. Finch didn't even flinch. He didn't need to. The crowd surged toward the mask maker as if pulled by a rope. Hands grabbed, shoved, reached. The mask maker dodged, slipping between bodies with a dancer's precision, but the crowd's movements were coordinated now. Someone caught the mask maker's sleeve. Another hand grabbed the edge of the pale mask. The mask maker jerked back, and the mask shifted, revealing a sliver of skin beneath, dark, sweaty, human. Cashin's breath caught. The mask maker was real. Not a myth. Not a symbol. Just someone hiding. The crowd's fingers tightened, hungry not just for calm now but for unmasking. Finch watched with mild interest, then looked back at Cashin. You see? He said softly. Everyone wears something. Cashin's rage flared. You're the one wearing the biggest mask. He snarled. Finch's eyes remained calm. And it fits, he said. Sable slammed her palm onto the relay interface. A harsh squeal burst from the relay box, then steadied into a clear tone. The room's overhead lights flickered. The old system woke up fully, hungry to carry sound. Sable leaned toward a small microphone embedded in the panel, an old speaking port, dusty but intact. She pressed her mouth close. People of the district, she began, voice trembling not with fear but with fury. You're being controlled. You're being tuned. There's a signal. Finch's eyes sharpened. He moved faster now, reaching toward Sable with sudden intent. Cashin surged forward, clutching Leo and the vial, and slammed his shoulder into Finch. Finch staggered half a step, surprised more by the insult than the force. His eyes flashed cold. Cashin hissed. Run! Sable kept speaking into the relay, voice rising. They made you desperate on purpose. They withheld calm to break you open. And now. A hand grabbed Sable's hair from behind. Someone from the crowd, face blank, yanked her head back. Sable cried out, her words breaking into a gasp. The relay broadcast carried her gasp too, magnified. The room froze for a heartbeat as people heard it, not just those inside the laundry, but those outside in the streets, in other buildings, wherever the relay could reach. A human cry riding a wire. Cashin realized the relay was working. The city was hearing. Finch's gaze darted toward the relay box, calculating. He raised his device again. The mask maker, half grappled by the crowd, tore free with a violent twist and lunged at the relay panel. They ripped a wire out with their gloved hand. Sparks flew. The relay squealed. Sable shoved the hand off her hair and slammed her mouth back to the microphone, voice rough. They have a new vial, she shouted. Not calm. Something darker. It rewrites need. It makes you obey. It makes you. Finch's voice cut through the chaos, suddenly loud, no longer gentle. Stop her! The crowd surged at Sable. Cashin's mind snapped into a decision. He lifted the shimmering vial high, holding it up where the crowd could see it. The dark liquid caught the flickering light and seemed to glow. Look! Cashin shouted, voice cracking. This is what they're using! Some eyes turned. Not all. But enough. In that brief shift, Cashin felt the room's balance wobble. Sable screamed into the microphone. The house is lying! A speaker somewhere in the laundry crackled, echoing her words back with a delay, making them sound like a ghost repeating them. Outside, the crowd beyond the laundry began to murmur. The relay's voice was spreading. The city was hearing the words the house didn't want heard. Finch's face tightened. His calm mask cracked further. He stepped toward Cashin, eyes fixed on the vial. Give it to me, he said, voice low and dangerous now, the gentleness burned away. Cashin's hands shook. Leo clung to him, small fingers gripping his shirt. The guard fired a shot into the ceiling, trying to scare the crowd back. Dust rained. People screamed. Finch didn't flinch. He looked at the guard like the guard was an insect. Then Finch spoke softly, almost too softly to hear over the chaos. But Leo heard. Leo's head lifted. Their eyes locked onto Finch. And Leo spoke again, clear as a bell, not give, this time, but something new. Home, Leo said. The word hit Cashin like a fist. The crowd's body stilled, then began to shift in a new direction, as if the room's compass had changed. Cashin felt cold spread through him. Finch had changed the command. The mask maker's voice came sharp, strained. He's steering them back to the hill. They gasped. He's turning the riot into a march. Sable's face went white. No, she whispered. If they go to the house. Cashin's mind flashed to the mansion with no curtains, the portraits, the study, the vault of calm under the floor. If Finch marched the district to the hill, Elias could frame it as an attack, justify anything, bury anything. Cashin's throat tightened. He looked down at Leo, at the child's dark, listening eyes. Then he looked at the relay microphone, still crackling, still hungry. He leaned toward it, voice shaking but loud enough to be carried. My name is Cashin Lark, he said. The room seemed to pause. Cashin continued, each word a step off a cliff. And my father taught you to need, he said. He taught you to beg. He taught you to fight each other for quiet. Don't march for him. Don't let Finch drive you like cattle. Finch's eyes blazed. Stop talking, he snarled. Cashin spoke into the relay anyway, louder. If you want calm, he shouted. Then look beneath the factory. Look beneath the floor. There's a room full of it. The crowd gasped. Murmurs erupted, shock, rage, hope. Finch lunged. Cashin tried to step back, but the crowd surged between them in confusion, the signal and the words battling for control of their bodies. The relay box sparked wildly. The old system strained, screaming under the weight of too much truth. And in that flickering light, Cashin saw something that made his blood run cold. On the laundry's far wall hung an old framed portrait, forgotten, warped by damp. A painting of Elias Lark from earlier days, smiling, hand raised as if blessing the district. Cashin had not noticed it before. Now, in the stuttering light, the painted eyes seemed to shift. To blink. Cashin's breath caught. It wasn't a trick of light. It felt like the house itself was watching. And somewhere far above, on the hill behind iron gates, Cashin knew Elias had just heard his son's voice carried into the city. He had just heard betrayal. Finch's hand closed around Cashin's wrist, crushingly strong. Enough. Finch hissed into Cashin's ear. Your father is going to want you in one piece. Cashin looked at the shimmering vial in his own hand, and realized the house wasn't just listening. It was preparing to answer. Chapter 12, The Gate with No Curtains. Finch's grip on Cashin's wrist was not just strong. It was instructive. A reminder of who could move whom. Cashin felt the bones in his hand pressed together, pain blooming sharp enough to cut through the signal haze in the room. Leo clung to Cashin's shirt, small fingers digging in, eyes still fixed toward Finch as if Finch's voice lived inside the child like a second heartbeat. The relay box screamed again, an ugly metallic shriek, then the light on its face flickered and died. The old node had carried as much truth as it could before the wires gave up. The speakers crackled into silence. For a second, the room was only sound made by bodies, panting, shoving, a chair scraping, glass crunching underfoot. Without the relay's voice, the city's ears went deaf again, and the laundry filled with confusion like smoke filling a sealed room. Finch leaned in, mouth close to Cashin's ear. You talk too much, he murmured. It's charming in a boy. It's deadly in the air. Cashin's jaw tightened. You're not taking me, he rasped. Finch's eyes stayed cold. I already have, he said. He lifted his device again, thumb hovering, and Cashin felt the crowd around them tense as if they were sharing Finch's muscles. The signal didn't even need to sound now. They anticipated it. They had learned its rhythm. The mask maker, half pinned against a rusted washing machine by blank-faced hands, twisted their head toward Cashin. The pale mask was smeared now, scuffed, a corner cracked. Beneath it, Cashin caught another sliver of skin and the edge of an eye, dark, frantic, alive. Don't let him separate you from the child, the mask maker gasped. That's the Leash. Sable stood near the relay panel, hair disheveled, eyes burning. Her mouth had a smear of blood at the corner from where someone had grabbed her. She looked like a person pulled out of a dream and thrown into the street. She met Cashin's gaze and, for once, there was no lecture in her eyes. Only a plea. Cashin's mind snapped into clarity. Finch didn't need calm stockpiles if he could steer need itself. Finch didn't need to sell relief if he could sell obedience. And Elias could use a riot-turn-march to justify anything, new guards, new laws, new silence. Cashin looked down at the shimmering vial in his hand. The glass was slick with sweat. The liquid inside moved slowly, as if it had weight and intention. Sable had said it rewrites need. Not just pain. Not just hunger. Need. Cashin's throat tightened around a bitter thought. The house had always rewritten need. It had just done it with posters and polished words. This was simply faster. Cleaner. Crueler. Finch's voice rose, loud enough to cut through the room. We're leaving, he said, and the crowd shifted as one, bodies turning toward the door as if pulled by invisible rope. The child comes. The doctor comes. Cashin comes. Sable's breath itched. No, she whispered. Cashin tightened his hold on Leo. The child's head rested against Cashin's collarbone, too calm, too listening. Cashin forced his voice low and steady. Leo, he whispered. Tell me something. Leo blinked slowly. What's your favorite smell? Cashin asked, words rushing out, absurd, desperate. Bread? Rain? Soap? Leo's mouth opened, and for a heartbeat Cashin saw confusion, real child confusion, flicker through the smoothness. Rain, Leo whispered, faint. Cashin's chest tightened. He clung to that flicker like a rope. Good, Cashin whispered. Remember rain. Remember your shoes splashing. Remember laughing. You're not a door. You're not a lock. You're Leo. Leo's lips trembled. The wrong smile wavered. Finch noticed. His gaze sharpened, and his voice softened, dangerously tender. Leo, he called. Home. The word hit the child like a bell struck clean. Leo's head lifted. The flicker of childness dimmed. Cashin felt a surge of anger so hot it made his eyes sting. Finch wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. He was whispering and owning. Cashin looked at Sable. If I break the vial, he hissed. What happens? Sable's eyes widened. Don't, she breathed. You don't know what aerosol does with this. Cashin's hand tightened around the glass anyway. He saw in his mind the canister Finch had tossed into the drainage channel. Calm turned into air, turned into surrender. He imagined this darker thing turned into air, turned into. No. He couldn't finish the thought. He needed a different risk. Cashin shoved the shimmering vial into Sable's hands. Hide it, he snapped. In your mouth if you have to. Sable stared at him for a heartbeat, then nodded once and slipped it into an inner pocket, pressing it close to her body as if shielding it with her ribs. Finch's eyes flashed toward Sable's coat. He saw the motion. His jaw tightened. Doctor, he said, still calm but now edged. Don't be foolish. Sable lifted her chin. I already was, she said. That's why we're here. Finch's device clicked in his palm. He pressed the button. The hum rolled through the laundry again, low, pulsing, intimate. Cashin felt it in his stomach, like a second heartbeat imposed on him. The crowd's faces smoothed. Hands tightened on shoulders. Bodies aligned. Leo's eyes unfocused, lips parting. Cashin moved before the signal could settle fully. He drove his elbow into Finch's ribs with all the strength fear could lend. Finch grunted, more annoyed than hurt, and Cashin used that moment to twist his trapped wrist, yanking free. Pain flared. Cashin didn't care. He grabbed the guard's rifle barrel and shoved it downward. The guard stared at him, confused, caught between orders and survival. Not at people, Cashin growled. At the device. The guard blinked. What? Cashin pointed at Finch's hand. Shoot his hand. The guard's eyes widened, horror flickering. Then the hum pulsed again, and the guard's face began to smooth, Finch's signal tugging at him too. Cashin grabbed the guard by the collar and shook him hard, desperate. Fight it, Cashin hissed. Think of your mother. Think of a song. Anything. Don't let him steer you. The guard's jaw clenched. Something in his eyes snapped back into focus. Rage, fear, humanity. He lifted the rifle, aim trembling. Finch turned toward him, expression cold. You won't, Finch said softly. The guard fired. The shot cracked through the laundry like lightning. The bullet struck Finch's wrist. Finch's device flew from his hand, spinning, clattering across the floor and skidding beneath a machine. The hum faltered instantly, as if a string had been cut. The crowd wavered, faces blinking, hands loosening. Confusion poured back in like air rushing into a vacuum. Finch looked down at his bleeding wrist with mild surprise, then lifted his gaze slowly. The calm mask returned, but it was thinner now, stretched tight over something furious. He smiled faintly. That, he said, voice quiet and lethal, was a mistake. Sable grabbed Cashin's sleeve. Move, she hissed. The mask maker tore free as the crowd wavered and bolted toward the back exit, dragging the cracked mask off entirely as they ran. For the first time, Cashin saw their face, young, sweat slick, eyes bright with pain and determination. Not a monster. Not a myth. Just a person who had learned to survive by becoming unreadable. They shoved open a rear door, and cold night air hit Cashin's face like a slap. They ran. The district streets were a maze of smoke and sirens, but the crowd was no longer a single river. It broke into streams, some chasing, some stumbling, some stopping to cry as awareness returned and guilt fell on them like ash. Cashin clutched Leo tighter, running hard. Leo's body trembled, the child's breath coming fast now, the spell cracking. Leo whimpered. It hurts. And Cashin's heart broke at the sound. Sable ran beside Cashin, her hand pressed against her coat where the vial was hidden. The guard followed, breathing hard, eyes wide with the shock of what he'd done. The mask maker led them through alleys, over a fence, across a yard where a dog barked until it recognized fear and went silent. Behind them, Finch's voice rose, not shouted, but carried by the district's walls. Bring them, he called, and Cashin felt the chill of knowing Finch didn't need a crowd to hunt. Finch had people. Finch had systems. They burst out onto a wider road that sloped upward, toward the hill. Cashin stopped short, panting. No, he gasped. Not up there. The mask maker's face was tight. Every road leads to the house, they said, voice raw without the mask. You said it yourself? If we run downhill, we drown in bodies. If we run sideways, we get boxed in. Sable's eyes flicked toward the hill, smoke drifting across the sky like a veil. We go to Elias, she said. Not to be saved. To force a choice. Cashin's stomach twisted. He'll crush us. Sable's gaze was fierce. He'll try, she said. But he can't crush what everyone is watching. Cashin thought of the mansion's windows with no curtains. He thought of cameras. Of eyes. Of how Elias had built his life in full view so he could control what people believed they saw. The road up was steep. As they climbed, the air changed again, less smoke, more clean cold. The district's noise faded behind them, replaced by the hush of wealth, smoother pavement, taller hedges, lights that didn't flicker. At the top, the iron gate waited. It stood open. Cashin's breath caught. Gates don't open themselves unless someone wants you inside. Beyond the gate, the mansion's pale walls glowed under floodlights. The windows stared outward uncovered, like eyes that refused to blink. On the front steps stood Elias Lark. He wore a dark coat, perfectly fitted. His hair was neat. His posture relaxed, as if he were welcoming guests to a dinner, not facing a city in collapse. Behind him stood a line of guards, too many, too still. Cameras perched on pillars, red lights winking. Elias lifted one hand in a slow gesture of greeting. Cashin, Elias called, voice warm, carrying down the driveway like honey. There you are. Cashin's chest tightened so hard it hurt. He stepped forward, still clutching Leo, Sable close, the mask maker tense at his side, the guard lagging behind like a man walking into his own sentence. Elias's eyes drifted over them, measuring. Then they landed on Leo, and Cashin felt something cold in his father's gaze, interest sharpened by calculation. My poor child, Elias said gently, as if speaking to Leo. You've been frightened. Leo's head lifted. Their eyes flicked toward Elias, the way they had flicked toward Finch. Cashin felt dread bloom. Elias's voice remained soft. Come inside, he said. We'll make everything quiet. Sable's hand tightened on Cashin's sleeve. The mask maker's jaw clenched, face pale. Cashin took another step forward, and realized the driveway was lined with speakers hidden in the hedges, small and subtle, like decorations. Elias smiled, almost imperceptibly. The house had been listening. And now, it was ready to whisper back into the city's veins. The riot didn't end, it got redirected. Question of the day, would you destroy the vial to stop mass control, even if it was the only thing keeping people from unbearable pain? Now comment the next audiobook you want a retelling of. Like and subscribe to join the momentum, and I'll bring you the next one.